3, 2, 1, and welcome back to Chasing the Racing, episode 68. And we're down in Redcar. We're joined by Geoff Crust, who's currently the Europarts Kawasaki team manager, but a long, illustrious career, including MotoGP team manager, crew chief, mechanic, all kinds. But we'll get on to that in just a second. But first, we've got our sponsor. And the laughing.
Go for it, Chris. No. Let's get the cheap shots clean out the way here first. Go on, Geoff. Just walk us through what you were saying off air there for a second.
Well, it was the fact that because I didn't quite sure what this podcast bit was, I watched one and I was just intrigued the way that Chris read out the advertising part of the business side of it.
Bit monotone, apparently.
Yeah, and it was just this. Let's put a little bit of something in it, and it was just flat. You know, but I do remember what it was all about. So that's where Chris came back to me.
That's the key bit.
Well, if you would like to read out the sponsorship, that would be fantastic. The same one off you go, racking up the tongue there. So there we go.
The episode is brought to you by Burrows Motor Company, and it's a local-owned business with sites in Rotherham, Barnsley, Doncaster, Sheffield, Worksop, and York, representing Toyota, Mazda, and Kia brands. Burrows Motor Company is large enough to help with any motoring requirement you should have, whilst remaining small enough to retain the family-friendly feel, with each team member working constantly to ensure they offer the best possible service to each customer, whether they've been coming
He's not
for 10 years,
He's not.
or if it's their first visit. So whether you're looking for a new Toyota, Mazda, or Kia, or wanting a nearly new or pre-loved used vehicle of a different make and model, Burrows Motor Company are large enough to help source the perfect car for you. Our dedicated team are well known to many of our customers and are just a phone call away. Of course, once you drive away, the service doesn't end there. With great options
he's a pro, though, isn't he?
to help you maintain
this, is he?
your vehicle in tip-top condition and fully manufacturer-trained technicians, body shop technicians, parts and service advisors, and our booking team are on hand to help with any inquiry you have. Just call in or contact your nearest Burrows site. And special offer, Chasing the Racing customers only. Mention Chasing the Racing on any new or used car.
And that Jeff's a dick.
And you get a lovely 250 smackaroonies off the.
You get another 250 quid off if you say that to them.
Happy days. Now,
well done, Chrissy, and that's why
I'll tell you, absolute pro.
That's why he's at front end of the championship. He's unshakable. There's you and me trying to psych him out. It was just full on leg dangle into the first corner there, Chrissy.
It was ad-libbed, wasn't it? That's all it was. It was just straight off the tongue.
Well, we're down in a beautiful part of the country.
Hold on, Redcar. Hold on, let's go back.
Wait. No, I'll put on my bit about Redcar, please, first. Welcome to Costa de Redcar. Now, I don't know whether you noticed, lads, as before we came in here, the palm trees on the beach, everything. It's just, don't look at me like that. It's bloody lovely here, you know. And tonight, I hope you notice there's a tropical storm coming through. Well, that's quite normal. About 5 or 6 o'clock, there's generally a tropical storm coming through.
But seriously, there is a tropical storm like in America, isn't it? Like Mississippi's going to blow away or something like that.
We've got our own. It's called Storm Fanny coming through. That's what it is.
Teesside's best kept secret, and we're parked just along from a beautiful furniture shop. Now, I must ask Geoff, how long did it take to come up with the name?
Oh, I tell you what, again, that was just one of those things that had to roll off the tongue, didn't it? And Geoff Crust Furniture.
Geoff Crust Furniture.
I'll tell you what, because
I'm waiting for something here. Obviously, honestly, people listening to this, right? You have no idea how unprofessional we really are, right? We're 3 dudes meeting up in a car park, right, in the middle of nowhere next to an abandoned building. And
use that abandoned building.
I met this 6-foot giant of a man, right, who looks like you've come straight out of a 70s porn sketch. And I'm like that going, Chrissy, no, you've shaved it off. You're classy like that.
I did have one though, because it was cool back then.
But I'm like that going, what have you signed up for now, Chrissy? I know we need money for the show, but we don't need to do this. So there we go. So it was a bit of a mind.
Let's go back to me business and we'll advertise it a little bit.
Yeah. Actually checked it out on. You've got an Instagram page there, GC Furniture, and it does actually.
Right, get straight on this. Carry on.
Looks like a quality shop. Obviously furniture, but what exactly do you do?
Well, now I've retired, so my daughter runs it. So it's a little bit more upmarket, as in she knows how to do Instagram and all the rest of it, and Facebooks and
moving the business into the 21st century,
and it's working. Bless her, she's pushing it on. So I'd said to you earlier, she's promoted me now, and I'm now officially the delivery boy.
Fantastic.
So I'm on it.
So
you know what I mean? I'm on it.
Because it's gone in one ear and straight out the other. What's that Instagram again?
GC Furniture.
GC Furniture. Here we go, furniture.
Got a nice website as well. But I tell you what, before obviously we'll get on to your career and where it all started and stuff. But obviously we've just came back from Snetterton BSB, and on the same weekend there was also a MotoGP race. First of all, Snetterton, there was some real good close racing, and obviously being the team manager of GR Motorsport, Brent Gladwin's team, and this year a new sponsor. If it was formerly known as the WD-40 Kawasaki, a very infamous looking team, and it's just changed the brand into, is it Europarts?
Eurocar parts.
Eurocar parts.
ELQ, Eurocar.
And you've got young Storm Stacey, the youngest ever BSB rider in the as the pilot. How's the beginning of the season started for you?
Well, I think we did have a long time with WD-40. That was what everyone remembers the team by, because it's such a good branded name, isn't it?
Well, it's like the Tyco we were just discussing this beforehand. It's a bit like the Tyco BMW. It's nothing to do with Tyco now, but it just rolls off the tongue.
It
so
does.
It's WD-40 Kawasaki. You just kind of get stuck with that a little bit.
Well, WD-40 was always a family branded name, wasn't it? And everyone knew what the product was. So when Brent found that as a sponsor, it was massive to us, you know what I mean? Because if you look in the paddock, it is hard to find some of these big international companies that will come into BSB. Brent does a brilliant job finding these guys, and we had it, I think, 8 years in the end. Or Brent had it 8 years, because I didn't do the full 8 years. I've only been doing it 5 or 6 years with Brent. But the marketing value of that, having that type of sponsor, and then, as I say, with party companies, not in a bad way or anything, it just became to the end of what we were doing with them. People moved on and things like that. And when he found the Euro car parts, it was like, what we do, he's done it again. He's found a good name sponsor, and hopefully off the back of that, when everything gets back to sort of some normality, then that's when you can play off that sort of branded name, because them guys are huge, you know what I mean, and they are pushing like hell with their new company name and what they're doing. So that's part of this business, isn't it? That you have to find these guys,
And obviously we're what I would call rounds in, but I think BSB are classing every race as a round now, so sort of 6 races in after Snetterton. How was the start of the season went for you?
Well, when we came up with this idea to put Storm on the bike, I think you remember last year we had him on the stock 600, and
was that the first year he was with you? He's only done 1 year at stock 600 for yourself.
Exactly. He came from basically Moto 3, and then Brent had a chat with me about this young kid, and he said, I want to put him on the 600. So I said, yeah, let's go for it. And really, at the beginning of last year was the first time I met Storm, and he was this gangly kid that arrived at Silverstone for the BSB test, and he was just a strange character, but he had something about him, and the more I learnt about him and during that year and things like that, he was just getting better and better. And from probably Knock Hill, I would say, that was his turning point, when he realised that he could win these races, and he literally just turned it around from then on. And going into the last round, we had a shot at winning the championship, and he actually led the race, the last lap, with 3 corners to go. If he'd have won the race, he'd have been champion. It flicked him out the seat. He had to get off the gas. He took the lead, flicked him out the seat. He had to get off the gas. The other 2 cars, and McGreevy won the championship. But it was as close as that.
It was tight, wasn't it?
It was so tight. And from when you think that he'd never seen a 600, he didn't understand how to ride it, and to come into that, and those guys, Richardson and McGreevy and those guys, and Luxton, who was leading it now, they've been doing it a while, and they were bit more understanding of what the game was all about. But Storm showed really true form to me, and maturity, how he understood the bike. And I came to Brent at the end of the year, and I said, look, let's put him on our stock 1000, just do a track day with him and see what he's up to. And Brent says, yeah, go on then. So we booked a track day with no limits at Donington, and we let him have a run out on it. And bizarrely that day, Westy was there and Ben Curry on the 600s, and Storm was having a look at them, because we were in the same garage and stuff, and I guess Storm literally by the 3rd session was backing it into the Melbourne loop. He had his elbow on the floor on they're on the
after
corner.
the warm-up laps.
And it was just, well, you've heard about that, didn't you? Well, I was trying to miss that. I was trying to miss that, right?
No.
Just to protect Storm a bit. But
Oh no! I've met Storm a few times, and I think we're definitely going to get him on the show. Yeah, and he keeps pestering us. But I tell you what, absolutely brand new, and he's gone through such a hell of a story. The lad has got such a hell of a strong backstory.
Storm, you're getting away with this. We're veering off now.
No, we are totally going off. Oh no, I know. No, you're going to tell it. There you go. But so he's got so many different layers as a rider. But we'll definitely have him on the show. But I need to know what's going on here, lads. You can't. Right, the lad's got thick skin. The lad can take it. Let's go for it.
Little whoops on the warm lap. But I tell you what, I watch most superbike sessions, especially this weekend. I had one race myself, so I had a lot more time, and I study a lot of the superbike sessions, especially the corners that I'm struggling in and whatever. And I've got to say, I've been really impressed with Storm so far this year. He's taken his time. His lines are very good. He doesn't look, it's very easy when you get a chance in superbikes to, go for it and end up, crashing and things. He looks very calm, very safe, and you can tell he's like learning step by step. Yeah. And if he continues on that, I think it'll be a very good, relationship for you.
Well, like I say, when we put him on the stock within, say, 4 sessions, I said to Brent, that kid, we've got to put him on the superbike just because how quickly he adapted to everything, and he was absolutely phenomenal, and you can sort of see that he was trying to understand the power and stop it wheeling, etc. And so Brent, well, that's the maddest thing you bloody said, and I said, well, it's worth a shot. So if we can do it, let's try to do it. But obviously he was 16-year-old. Well, 16-year-old, and you can't do it and things like that. So we had to speak to Stuart Higgs and how can we do it if we can do it. Stuart was full on. He liked the idea of it all. So then we had to speak to the ACU. They had to speak to the ACU. How could we get him in because he was underage? You can't ride one till you're 17, and etc. etc. So it was all getting a little bit complicated. But we thought if we can push it, and let's have a go with him, you know what I mean? So we spent a lot of time behind the scenes to try and get that ball rolling. And when it all sort of clicked into place, it was like, right, here we go, And we took him to the BSB test at the beginning of the year. And
was that in Spain or
where
was that in the
so
world?
The first one, it was at Monte Blanco, and then we went to Jerez. But in Monte Blanco, the Storm turned up and he didn't have any, he had his old leathers and stuff like that. So he wasn't this prima donna kid. He was just trying to think, I'm going to ride this superbike, and that's all he could get in his head. And then when he started to see other riders turn up, he was going, shit, I'm going out on track with them lot, you know what I mean? And I'm the beginner. And I said, Storm, just enjoy it, just go.
See, I've only met him a few times. Was he actually quite fazed by that? Because he's a confident, and he can ride a scooter fast. He can ride anything fast. It's great to hear from my point of view that he was, well, quite frankly, realising where he was. Thinking, this is a huge moment.
Because those guys are all experienced riders and all that, and he thought, Christ, I'm going to go out on the same track as them with the same type of bike, and what am I going to look like? And it's always that apprehension, I think, from anyone you do it. But I said to him, just go out and have some fun. Just have fun, and you'll be fine. And literally, he just went out, and because he'd never beaten the track, so he didn't understand the track, and all the other guys had beaten the track and stuff like that. And he thought he's just going to be a mobile chicane, but he wasn't. Within a day, he picked the game up. He knew what he was wanting, and we just kept chipping away at it. And by the end of it, I think it was probably about 15, 16 fastest.
Wow!
And you just think, Christ, that kid's never been here yet. He's never ridden a thing.
Yeah, as a starting point to build on, that's a fantastic start.
Well, that's it. And when you look back and you're thinking, I think it was just under 2 seconds off the fastest, and you're thinking, well, that's a workable gap, isn't it?
Yeah. Of course it is. Have you worked with anyone like that similar in the past? I'm trying to think, when you think you get...
Do you mean like super talented?
I've never worked with Chrissy yet.
Get your tongue out of his arse, man, for God's sake. No, anyone like that, you just thought they've stepped off another class, because I've, listened to the BSB commentary and stuff like that, and a lot of people are saying that you're almost better getting a 600 rider and putting them straight onto a big bike, like a super bike that is not stock fouls and almost polluting their mind. What do you make of that?
Well, Storm would say, because he he didn't know what to expect. You just take it as what it is, don't you? Like you say, he'd never rode on slick tyres or anything. He just didn't know. So, but within that first day, he just thought, well, it's a bike with two wheels, isn't it? So just get on, ride it. I'll tell you something he never said to me. It's fast, and you know, because in Monte Blanco, it's got a good straight there. And he never came in and went, oh, Christ, this thing. And that would have been the first reaction I would have. If you put any kid on it, they'd have gone, whoa, what's all that about? And he's never said it to this day. He just goes, oh, it's all right, that, isn't it?
Just taking it in a side.
To be fair, I did see him drift and not like some customer Norton bike around a car park. So I don't think much phases Storm Stacey. It'll be, like we say, great to get him on the show.
Now, the rest of the meeting, obviously, there was some really good racing, especially in the superbikes, much closer than it was last year. There was that
was
good.
Incredible, wasn't it?
The racing was excellent. You know, loads of close overtaking manoeuvres. We had another Andy Irwin incident, which is you know after the round before, and obviously all the media attention. He had to start from the back of the grid in the first race, and unfortunately got tangled with Alex Olsen on his way through. And it looked
I
like
still don't quite understand that rule. In any case, the kid's gonna do what he did, got himself into bother, and then you find him on the back row,
Wait, he's
and
gonna
then
find
put
more bother.
a load more bother in front of him, and he ain't going to stop, is he? He's just going to keep doing
well,
it.
I think they actually adjusted it, and after the Vickers incident, they didn't make him start from the back, but I think they maybe took championship points off him or something, and just demoted him 3 places on the grid. But so there was he was really unlucky to get involved with that. I haven't actually seen the footage from above, but on board it just kind of looks like two people going for the same bit of the track, and his bike cartwheel, like he must have really done some damage. Got himself sorted for the next race, but unfortunately, because he didn't get a full lap in, he still had to start from the back of the grid. Did a really good job to get through to, I think he was up to about 9th, 10th.
That's serious.
And when he passed, so for people that know Snetterton Coram, you've got the long right-hander, and then the traditional line is you're pretty much on the white line on the right before, so right, then flick left as late as you sort of dare to open up onto the straight. Now, a fantastic move around the outside of, it was like a real ballsy, skillful pass to pull on a top 10 BSB rider.
That was class.
However, coming to then, basically, he made that pass loads of times safely in the third race of the weekend. The issue that he had was when he passed Vickers, he then came back to the white line and left Vickers nowhere
to go.
And I really felt sorry for Ryan, because after such a crash-filled season last year, he's really matured this year. And I spoke to a few people in his team before the season started, and they said what we want for Ryan this year is we don't want to see him going really fast and getting like a 5th, then crashing a few times, then front row and then crashing loads. We just want him consistently in the top 10, and he started the season absolutely perfect. 10th, 9th, 10th, 9th, 10th, 8th, around that sort of area, consistently banging in the points and learning, staying on the bike. And unfortunately got collided with Andy.
But to be fair, he did cut back in front of him.
Yeah, it was 100%
Andy's fault.
It was his fault.
And I mean, just out of interest, what did you make of the Brooks incident? We've discussed this on the podcast ourselves, but it's a talking point. Do you have a particularly strong opinion?
We're not having a pop at him. It's just it's an incident. You know what I mean? Far from it.
The first sort of signs that I saw of Andy Irwin is that we did the Supersport with Taron at the same time as he was coming through, and I would watch that kid, and as he was, starting racing on the 600s and things, and he was like that on the 600. He just hasn't changed. But the difference is when he was on the 600, he wasn't as fit as he is now. So generally, I used to say to Taron, don't mess with him. Stay out of his way. Just sit behind him, because after about 5 or 6 laps, he'd wear himself out.
Really?
And he did, and he used to get slower. Because he'd be on the grass, he'd be doing mad manoeuvres that you just think, where's that one come from? So I said to him, don't get involved with him, because you don't have to. The race is 12, 14 laps or whatever. So after 5 or 6, he'll peter off, and generally he did. The thing is now, he's fitter. Exactly. So he can keep that up all the way. But to him, he's never changed. It's not as if he's just become this type of rider. That's how he races.
Do you feel he needs to change, or do you feel like we need characters like that in the sport?
It's not the character. It's
the hunger.
The hunger you'd never want to take out of a kid, because that's what racing's all about. That's his ambition. That's where he wants to go with it all. The only trouble is you've got to respect your other riders. You've got to. I've seen in my life of racing injuries that you don't want to go there. So don't put your other
in unnecessary risk. Yeah.
Don't put the other person out on the track in that position, because if it goes wrong, it's a sad way to go out of the game. So
if you were working with them right now, so how as a management role, do you keep that hunger and teach them about that respect? That'll be, that's not like a 5-minute conversation, is it? Or is it? Please tell me.
No, it isn't a 5-minute conversation, but I think it's one of those things that it's just to rein that bit in. The kid's fast, so you don't take that away from him, but he's got to understand how he should be fast and where to go fast. Because I think I was listening to one commentary, and I think Rob Back had tweeted in saying, Christ, he can just pass anywhere. And he's got a good motorbike, and he does. So like you say, Chrissy, to do that manoeuvre around Corrams is weird, because you just think, well, I'm on a decent line again, and I'm going fast enough, and then this kid comes around the outside of you thinking, what the hell is that all about? So he's got a good bike, so he doesn't have to do that type of manoeuvre. Yeah. He can just position himself in a different place. So when he clipped Brooksy, I would say that's a respect to Brooksy, because Brooksy didn't know he was there, and I don't believe Brooksy did. And so to come up in that line, there's no area for manoeuvre there. You get it wrong, and you're in the barrier. And that's my problem with him, is that you can't do that to other riders. You just can't.
Because like you say, he's got the capability of passing.
He's got the package, so don't put that into.
He doesn't need to do those desperate moves.
Exactly.
He's got the skill and the.
He has, and he's got the package to do it on this year. And like where he might have had slow bike before or whatever, he hasn't got that problem now.
Which is great to see as well. And obviously Glenn, fantastic weekend leading the championship. Tremendous third race where he won. Also fantastic to see Christian Innen get his first win of the season, and Christian Innen first ever BSB win, and Josh Brooks' first win of the season.
Then he nearly writes himself off.
That was. If anyone didn't see it, check it out on YouTube. He nearly loses his arm after his first win.
Silly knacker. You know what
I
mean?
Also, I tell you, when I was watching practice and qualifying, Danny Buchan looked so impressive going into the corners, just carrying massive lean angle and so committed on the front end. And unfortunately, the safety car came out, tyres cooled down, and the first left-hander of the lap took the front, smashed the bike to smithereens, got the bike fixed, and then the next race 2, ran in the back of Danny.
I'll just give a round of applause to his team.
Bradley Ray rolled the bike off again and then got the bike fixed and got out in the third race. So a real terrible weekend for Danny. On the other side of the garage, great weekend for Lee Jackson. Got a couple of fourth positions and riding brilliant front row. And it's great to see much more in the mix. Tom Bradwell rode really well. Both McCann Yamahas, they had Mick Shanley working for them this weekend, and they were actually starting from scratch with a new sort of engine software or whatever. And so as the weekend went on, they got much stronger. And by the end of the weekend, both Taz and O'Halloran had the sort of pace to be in that front group. So hopefully
where were they finishing?
They were 6th and 7th, I think. Or
what was nice was to see Taz with a bit of mojo back. For me,
because he had a few big crashes at the first round.
He did, and I just think that he wasn't riding to where he should be. And when at Snetterton, you thought, go on then, Taz, have a punt at that.
I think when we get to Silverstone, which is next round, that's probably his best track of him and Jason's best track of the season with that bike. So I think we could see them back. Last time. I also just want to quickly mention, did you get to watch the MotoGP this weekend?
No.
Outstanding.
No, I didn't. But I was so happy for Hervé Poncherel's team.
Have you seen the last lap? Of the last corner, last lap.
Oh my God! I tell you what, it is absolutely brilliant. Even I watched it, man. There you go.
I mean, KTM have just literally came so strong on the scene this year, and that championship is just totally mixed up. It's great.
Well, there's one guy just not there.
Marcus isn't there. It's open, and literally
we can win.
Anybody can win.
I was just about to say now. Me and my dad were having a bit of crack about it. He's actually he just thinks it's not quite the same about Marquez. And now my dad doesn't have favourites, you know what I mean? He just doesn't have favourites. But he's just like, it's just not the same. You haven't got that championship holder, no one's really chomping at the bit. But for me, I'm the opposite side of the pit. I think it's just everyone's got this right. Now, if I'm going to be world champion, it's this year, and everyone is jumping.
No, I had another red flag after. If you didn't see it, Maverick Vinales had to jump off with brake failure at 140 mile an hour. So the race got red flagged, restarted, and we had the main 3 people in the race were Paul Espargaro, Mir, and Olivier what's he? Miguel
Oliveira.
That's the one. Miguel Oliveira. And
he's good with this.
And what a final lap. So them three. But what was really sort of interesting for me is both KTM riders, Paulo Espargaro and Miguel Oliveira, have had a real massive spat. Because last week at the same track, they came together and cleaned each other out, and then there was a massive spat on Twitter and in the press. Basically, both riders were blaming the other person, and Oliveira is actually
not normal, is it?
Oliveira is actually a dentist, and he's he's very academic, and he said to
didn't damage.
I'm going to bring your teeth
out. He said something in the press like, Paulo's, I'm not saying all motorbike races are stupid, but some people are born less intelligent than others. Basically calling Paulo Espargaro thick, and then it came down to the last lap, and them three were battling for the win. And Jack. Sorry, I said Jack before.
Miller.
It was Jack Miller. Sorry, totally got that wrong. And and going into the last corner, Paulo Espargaro's leading. Jack Miller stuffs him, runs him out wide, and then Oliveira comes up the inside, takes the win for
it was
Tech
brilliant
3.
to see.
Amazing.
That was the biggest news of the weekend. You know, the first time they're like, for 40 years I've been dreaming of this. You know, you could have given it to any factory team. You know what I mean? But they were like, you could feel it through the telly.
Do you know? Sorry, I mentioned Mir. The reason why he was doing really well early on in the race, but they didn't have
someone sacked.
They didn't have another. So when it got red flagged, they didn't have a new tyre ready to put in.
No,
so
put a new rear in. They put a new rear in, but never front.
They didn't have one like for the allocation or whatever, or didn't have one ready. So he got stuffed. But he was running for the race win beforehand.
Right. Neil Hodgson, right, called it immediately, right? This is the biggest thing. The pit board went out, right? He had easy +1. And he
had about half 0.3, I think.
Shut up, Chrissy. I'm trying to build it up. We're in the entertainment business. No, next time, if I say 5 minutes, you back me the fuck up, princess. Right, there you are. So we had a
job you two on Sky Sports, I believe. So go on. Feed me this race.
So this was good. So anyway, so he's going out, right, and he had a 0.5 of a lead. But shut up, man. So anyway, he sticks his pit board out and it's like +0. Neil Hodgson starts screaming at the telly, going, "What you doing? What you doing?" And even I'm sitting there going, at no point did this twig with me at all. It's going, tell him the truth. I'm going, well, what's going on? And Neil Hodgson said he's going to ride defensive the entire lap. And you think, well, of course he is. It's +0. You think he's right there up on his arse. So the one big corner where they had that, like where the Rossi near miss came from, he just went in and hugged the line all the way through. Had no corner speed, and it just allowed everyone to bunch up. So there's two people getting sacked: the front tire guy, right, and the pit board guy. You know what I mean? He's standing there going, "Yeah, part of the team." It's like he's getting his P45.
Well, it's not the pit board guy. He just gets told what to put on the
but it was his face last, son. It was his face last. It's like Mr. KTM's going, I want him killed. I want him killed. That's it.
Well, you wouldn't do it in Austria either, would you?
Before we leave the MotoGP or whatever the next question is, can we talk about like a professionalism? Yamaha, Vinales. Was it Vinales? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you notice early in the race he had a bike problem? In that race earlier, he rolled, he had loads of problems, and he's pointing down at the bike and all sorts. 2 laps later, he's bailed. Now, Mr. Yamaha's probably sharpening his samurai sword up, going, right, I want him sacked as well. I think if he's had at some point he's had a huge mechanical riding the bike, and then he's carried on going, and then wrote the bike clean up. I tell you what, that hit some force, that mind.
What do you mean, though?
No, so it's a bit like if he's had brake failure beforehand, he should have pulled on. But that's easy for me to say. Of course, it is. He's out there doing a job, battling for championships. But in the same breath, it was a bit like there was a problem with the bike for him to.
Yeah, but you see that quite often, don't you? Where
of course
if they're not sure, look at Carl Rad at the weekend at Snetterton. He knew there was an issue with his bike.
God, he's unlucky, isn't he? He is so unlucky.
Should he have pulled in or should he pulled off the track? Because he didn't know, did he? You know what I mean? But then he had probably a similar problem at Donington, so he maybe thought, hang on,
I can fix this.
Field, and I'll get away with it.
He's actually riding really well at the moment.
He's riding brilliantly. He's just unlucky.
His points don't actually reflect his pace because he's had a few sort of unfortunate errors.
He's at the front. He's properly howling at the front, isn't he? And then
he's come back stronger this year, hasn't he?
So
that opportunity he had last year, and he's taken it with both hands. And I think, he's
good on
him. I always thought when Carl, again, he was one of those kids that I saw through BSB when I started to do BSB. You see this kid, and you're thinking he has got something again, and it sort of petered off, didn't it? When he went to Worlds and the Super Sport, and I remember seeing him at Donington on that round, and he just didn't seem interested and things like that. And you're thinking it's a shame because he had the talent to get him there, but then it never really worked out for him. So then he was left in this no man's land area, wasn't it? When he came back with the Moto 2 thing, project, and it was him and his dad, and we used to quite often they'd come outside our garage and you could see them, and his poor dad was left in a bit of a no man's land, as in I'm not sure what to do, and Carl was trying to do it, and so it was good to see him get that opportunity to change it around. And I think maybe it gave him a kick with the backside as well, and thought, hang on, I'm better than this. I can do something. So.
I'm far from a team owner. Shock horror, I know. But I think what he's done so far has definitely secured him for next year.
Oh, you think?
I would personally be very upset to see him. It would be.
You say that, but it's so difficult. This sport is so up and down. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. Look at Josh Elliott, first round last year. He was leading the championship, beat Scott Redden, Josh Brooks, everyone in BSB, leading the championship. Next, hottest thing in BSB at the time, on an unfashionable bike, really, and a new team as well without the experience. And then fast forward to the first round the following year, and he was filling in for your team in the Superstock,
and he had nothing.
And he was qualified like 25th in Superstock. I mean, so you say 1 minute you're winning things, and there's nothing to say that he won't get a kick up the arse and come back and be winning or whatever. But
you don't know what went on in that. But nobody does. Apart from them,
I'm just making the point that you kind of extrapolate from a few good results. You kind of then make predictions for the future. This sport is just so
thick,
up and down. And you just never know what's you seriously never know what's coming. No. But obviously mention about MotoGP, and I know you've got a long interesting career linked with MotoGP. But when I was doing obviously Googled your name,
a little bit of homework.
A little bit of homework, Geoff.
I just thought you were in porn. So there you go.
A little bit of homework, and I see.
The important thing to remember is I like you. So you're welcome.
Was I good at the porn?
I see you did a bit of racing in the 80s, and I didn't know you actually raced. So tell us about how you got into racing in the first place, and like what bikes you used to race.
Well, I'm going to mention my dad, because it was my dad who got me into racing, and it was one of those that when I was growing up as a kid, my dad raced, and so we generally ended up at a racetrack somewhere, and it wasn't road racing, it was grass tracking or stuff like that. But that was always interesting. There was always motorbikes in the garage. In fact, we had motorbikes in our house, not in bits, but my mum had to forsake a living room because my dad wanted to keep certain of his special bikes in the living room.
Brilliant.
So it was just that's how I was brought up.
Proper bloke.
Exactly. It was as well.
I'm going to the pub because I can. Smoking tabs and the bikes in the front.
Yeah, exactly. They used to get dragged out at Christmas so we could go and have a Christmas dinner in there. But it was always one of those situations where my dad was involved with whatever he was doing, and he sort of, to be honest, Chrissy, do you know when I met you last week and that we were at Drew Ridge Bay? Well, the reason I was there, and I don't know what you were doing there, was the fact that was that, look, he's going red now. So
that's no question here, no lies.
Look, I didn't see him in the sand dunes or anything. So I'd gone there because I had a picture of myself sat on my dad's race, because they used to do sand racing there. I don't know if you remember that, but they used to do sand racing at Georgia, and there was a picture of me as a probably about 6 or 7 year old, and I was sat on the bike with my dad coming off the beach between the sand dunes, because they used to park the vans and that in the car park area. So I was trying to relive my youth a bit and thinking, because I hadn't been there since I was that old, and I was thinking, I remember my dad talking about this Drew Ridge Bay, so I went there to try and find or even look what it was. Sort of my vague memory was letting me remember. So that's why I was there. And my dad, then I think I was about 8. He bought me my first bike, and it wasn't anything special because there was no kids' bikes back in them days. And bizarrely, he brought me down on the beach down here, and he said, "Right, we're going to teach you how to ride a bike."
What bike was it?
It was a BSA Bantam.
Oh,
so
hardtail job, fantastic.
It was, and I think it cost a couple of quid. You know,
green. Was it the green?
It was as well.
I bet it was. Oh, I see. Chris is looking at me.
He's an anorak on him, and you can see where this one's going.
See,
I've
he
got
knows,
one of them.
He knows numbers. I know life. So
exactly.
there you go.
But I always remember when he brought me down because it was foggy, and you like
we are at the smog base.
Yeah, exactly. And he started it up. He set me on it. He said, "Right, here you go. Put it in gear. You let that clutch out and off you trot, you know." And he goes, "I just disappeared in the fog." And my dad thought, "Oh Christ, where's he gone?" You know.
That's one son.
And I thought, well, if I can't turn it around, I'm just going to end it in the sea sooner or later, and it'll stop. But anyway, so I managed to turn it around, and that was my start of riding a bike. So I was probably about 8-year-old then, and like I say, there was no schoolboy racing or anything, but my dad was involved with the sand racing club, and he actually started that club when he was younger.
What year was it? Sorry, I just want to
So that would have been 72.
72.
Yeah. So what was a bit strange about then, it was that, let's say, the kids wanted to race, but there was no class for them, so you couldn't race until you were 16. And then a schoolboy class appeared. So my dad said, "There you go, you can go racing." So we built a bike. Again, there wasn't a bike you could buy, you know, off a shop or anything. So we built our own, and it was a Villiers then. It was a 197 Villiers.
Oh, nice.
And so I raced it on the beach, and that's where I learnt about racing. And I don't know whether you've ever raced anything on the beach, but it's a bit like dirt tracking or long tracking. It's got the same sort of feeling. Do you know what I mean? It's because it's in an oval, and we have generally a good beach down here, so it was always a good place to go and ride. And because it was on the doorstep, it was easy to do. My dad was involved in it, and that's how I started racing. And then when I was 16, I progressed to the adult side of it.
You see, what upsets me is we have as far as the Northeast is concerned, we have no the motorcycle fraternities going, especially the racing side.
Completely.
So scrambling and everything, sand racing. So how far did the sand racing go? Was it all the way up Tynemouth, Whitley Bay, all the way up to Bamburgh, and was there race meetings all the way along?
Well, my dad ran the Tyne Tees sand racing club, which
Right.
was this one, and that basically consisted of Saltburn, which is a bit further down the coast, and this one here. But then I think the northeast area took over the Druridge Bay and places like that. But there was certain ones, but because my dad didn't have time really to drop everything and take me racing, we just concentrated on just these little bits here.
What did your dad do for a living?
He worked at ICI at the.
I was about to say the furniture shop there. That's
No.
a family tradition here.
No, well, it was one of them as well. Where back in them days, there was two main employees in this area. One was the steelworks. Obviously, you've seen the blast furnace still there, although it's finished now. And ICI, the chemistry industry. And when we were at school, you literally went there or there. You know what I mean? And that
The
was
left
it.
Twix and
That's
the
it,
right
that's it,
Twix.
It was.
Off
And my
it
dad
goes.
kept saying to me, "Son, don't ever go into them businesses. You know, try something else." And
Right.
so my dad was real adamant. He didn't want me to go into ICI British Steel. So back in them days, you were literally forced to do that. You know, both exams for both type of industry, and you were picked to go in one of them. But the thing was, it was like, "Okay, Dad, what am I going to do?" And then my dad said, "Well, why don't you sign up and go in the RAF or the Army and learn a trade in that?" So I actually took my exams to go in the RAF. I passed them, took my medical, had a signing-in date, signed up for 9 years, was going to join as an aircraft engineer, and that was going to be my life. But in the meantime, I'd finished school, and my dad said, "Well, you ain't going to sit on your backside." And he said, "There's two guys in Redcar who were just opening a bike shop." He says, "And you're going to go and work there for a few months until you go in the RAF." So I said to me, "Dad, well, fair enough." I didn't want to sign on, and back in them days you could get social or whatever. So I went and worked at them. And one of the guys was a guy called John France, and the other one was Graham Petit. Well, the bike shop was called Petit in France. And I started there, and they got a Yamaha dealership, was the first dealership that they secured. I guess I'd been there 3 months or something like that, and it was due to go in the RAF. And they'd said to me one day, "Oh, we're looking for an apprentice." Basically, it was just them two guys and me. "We're looking for an apprentice. Do you know anyone?" And I thought, "Well, I can do that. You know what I mean? I fancy doing that job." And I went home and I said to my dad, I said, "Do you know I'm meant to be going in the RAF?" And he went, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I want to do that now." And he said, "Well, it's up to you, son. If you want to go and work there,
As
do
long
it."
as you're not in steel or chemicals.
Exactly. Yeah, as long as you're not coming into them industries, go and do it then. And that's it. Well, how it happened. I said goodbye to the RAF and said, "Thanks very much, but I don't want to come anymore." And I started working in Petit in France motorcycle shop, and then they turned from not just a Yamaha dealer. They got all the major dealerships, and the company grew and grew. But one of the good things about when I started there was both of those guys road raced, and so the both.
Sorry, tarmac or road?
Road as in Croft.
All right, sorry.
So road racing like Chrissy does.
Rock.
So short circuit.
Not pure
stuff.
road racing.
That's
yeah.
it.
So
Man sport.
but they did Scarborough, So that's
there we go. Yeah, I'll forgive them.
So and then they said to me, well, you can come and help us. So I literally finished work like at 5 o'clock, my normal day work with it in the bike shop. I'd go home, get me tea, and then shoot back down again, and then work in their garages, building and messing around with race bikes. And I just thought, I'm in heaven here. This is brilliant. They never paid me. It was just the fact I loved doing it.
They were in heaven at all. We're gonna free mechanic here.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
But the fact was to go away at the weekend and go road racing as a 16-year-old and be involved in it, like you say, going to Scarborough and things like that. And I always remember when they did Scarborough, there was a couple of little stories I'll come up with there. Was that one of the years we were there, my dad was actually scrutineering at Scarborough as well, so we were there. And the factory MV Augusta was there, and the Italians had turned up with that bike, and I don't know if it was Reedy or one of them lot was riding it. But as a young lad listening to that thing start up, and there was these foreign guys round it, it was just a different world, to listen to that bike warm up. And I still remember that noise to this day, because I've heard one since, and you just think, Christ, it takes me back that. But I guess I was going back to what John and Graham did, because they had the bike shop, and they had a qualifying on the Saturday. One had to work in the shop, so John France qualified for Graham, swapped his leathers, got his helmet on, and actually qualified for both of them. And people were coming up and saying, "Oh, I haven't seen Graham today." You know what I mean? He says, "Oh, he's on the bloody toilet again." It's like he wasn't even there. He was working in the bike shop. But John qualified for both of them.
That is some trust in friends, that isn't it? Don't you dare put a bad lap time in.
No, he actually did a better job for Graham than himself.
Parish and Sheen once did that at Mallory Park as well.
Did they?
Yeah, Sheen was injured, and Parish went out on Barry's bike and out-qualified himself with Barry's transponder. No, it's
but they were real characters, them two lads. And as I say, when I wanted to, because I'd done a bit of grass tracking and things like that, and then I started to work for them guys, and because we were going racing, I'd stopped racing because I just enjoyed going with them and helping them. And then it came to a point where they were stopping because they couldn't physically give the time, and I thought I might have a go at this road racing bit. And I thought, what should I get? And because they were a Yamaha dealer, I had a bit of choice of anything, and I bought myself an RD 400, and I thought, all right, I'll do the 500 production class. And I tilled off to Carnaby with this new 400, and I think I probably finished 6th or something at the first ever race I did, and I thought, well, that was all right. And back in them days, it wasn't just one group of riders on the grid. You actually had to, there was 2 lots that you had to, there was an A and a B to qualify to go into the final. And I only did probably 3 races towards the end of that year, but I was doing all right, and I thought, I quite fancy this. It's all right, you know what I mean? It's better than grass track, and you don't get dirty and shit like that. So I thought,
at this point, have you discovered that tarmac's a lot harder than sand?
You fall off there and bang your head. You know about it, being there on the beach. So it feels like concrete. So, but it was the fact that I enjoyed it, and then that winter time, the 350 LC was brought out. And I thought, well, I want one of them now. So I said to them, at the lads who own the bike shop, I says, can I have one of them? And they were only getting 2 in. That's all they were allocated until more came into the country. So they went, yeah, no problem, Geoff, you can have one of them. So I got one of them, and it was like chalk and cheese. I mean, I took both bikes to Snetterton, bizarrely Snetterton, and I rode them both there, and I thought, that 400's in the bin now. You know what I mean? That 350, it had twin discs on it and everything. I thought, this thing, I can outbreak anyone on this.
So were you doing like British at this point, or were you doing club racing?
Well, it was club racing. That's
right.
That's what it was. Because there was no series for a 500 production as such. You know what I mean?
Right.
Things that back in them days, they had a thing called the Yeovan Roadrunner series or something like that, but it wasn't that big and it didn't work. So everyone really club raced. You know what I mean? So it was you picked the club and off you trotted. But what was quite good back in them days, you could just bounce around and go to just different tracks, and that's all I wanted to do. I thought, well, I want to learn that track, I want to learn that track. I'd go up to Scotland, and that was into this, that's where I met like Neil Mackenzie and people like that, because they were racing up there at East Fortune and Knockhill and things, but they'd come over the board and do Croft and things like that. So there was just this good gang of us that seemed to go racing back in them days. And when we were on the 350s, it was just mayhem. I mean, it was because it was so close racing. It was just bloody good fun. You know what I mean? And you could just do what you wanted. No one give a damn. You know what I mean? You talk about Irwin, but it was just like dive bombing each other. You know what I mean? It's just like you get 6 of you going around the one corner at the same time. No one give a damn about anything. So you did fall off. You did, but it was one of them where you bounced back up, repaired the bike, and had another go at it. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I thought, where am I going with this? You know what I mean? Should I get a TZ and try and progress? But the trouble is
so what year? So I'm trying to put a timeline together. So
that was 81 and going into 1982.
Right.
So like late teenager.
Yeah.
So
I was, and I was just a kid who say you just throw the bike in the back of a van, sleep in the back of the van, and off you trotted, and that's how everyone did it back then.
Yeah.
So it was no different to anybody else that was in the paddock. But I thought, should I progress and everything? And I bought a TZ 350, and it was the biggest pile of rubbish I ever bought. Do you know when you're thinking, and I thought it's got to be a good one. This is got, and the thing seized, it didn't run right, it had ignition problems, and I just thought, this isn't what it's all about. So I sold it, and then I thought, I can't afford to go and do what I want, so what's the point of doing it? I'd done the 350 series for a good couple of years, and I'm not blowing you on trumpet, but I was good at it. I won races, and I thought that's was good fun. But then the rest of it became a bit of a not sure.
You couldn't really see a career.
No,
as a rider.
There was no. When you think now, what if you can try and make it? Back then, it wasn't. It was nothing like that. So it was like, okay, I'll pull the plug on it, and then after that, I'd just sort of help lads. You know what I mean? So if they wanted a mechanic, I'd say, hey, I'll come along with you and just help you. I generally quite enjoyed that for a while. And the story of how I suppose I got into GPs was the fact that I think it was 1985. I was at Donington Park with a friend of mine, helping him out, and I met Neil Mackenzie there. And Neil had progressed by then. He'd been picked up from when I raced against him on the 350 production bikes, and Armstrong, a British bike. I don't know. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they had a team, and they picked up on Neil. So Neil had seen me at Donington and said, "Oh, what are you doing, Geoff, now?" And I said, "Oh, basically nothing. I'm just working at the bike shop, blah blah, and helping some guys out." And he says, "Do you want to come and work for me?" And I says, "Wow, what are you going to do?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to do GPs with this Armstrong." And I says, "Oh yeah?" And I said, "Christ, that was a different world." But I thought, yeah. He said, "Well, if you're interested, go and have an interview." The guy who ran the team was a guy called Chaz Mortimer, who was an ex-racer who took over the team. And Neil said, "Go and have an interview with him." So in '85, I was shot down to Silverstone. That's where they were based. I had an interview, and Chaz says, "If you want to go and work for Neil, good on you. Have a go with it." So I came home, and I'm thinking, Christ, so I'm working in a bike shop in Redcar, and now I've got this opportunity to go and basically travel. I wouldn't say the world back then, because it was.
There's your mum and dad packing your bags.
Well,
for you
it was like, but I had my girlfriend at home, and I'm thinking, should I go? I shouldn't.
Yeah,
go.
she's not worth it.
But I said to everyone, I said, "Here, look, this is what I'm going to do." I says, "Have I got this opportunity? It's a 1-year deal. I'm going to do it because I just want to see what it's all about." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they all went, "Yeah, no problem, off you trot." So I literally did, and it was just this most bizarre situation because back then we did World Championships or GPs, and we were doing British Championship, and we did the 250, 350 British Championship and the 250 World Championship, and then Chaz Mortimer, the guy around the team, would, as soon as we jumped into Europe, instead of coming home anyway, he'd say, "I've got you another race this weekend." And we were doing road circuits as well. Anything to make money, Chaz would have us doing these races. And so I just think, I disappeared for this year. I lived in a caravan back then because that's the way the paddock ran. Yeah, I lived out in a caravan outside the workshop. You left England. I remember Chaz saying to me, right, the first race I think was in Jarama near Madrid. I'd only ever been outside of the UK once on a holiday on a siesta bloody bus to Salou or something, you know what I mean, on a holiday. And then this guy said to me, there's the van, there's a caravan, and I'll meet you in Jarama.
No, when you started this...
Head east.
No,
but it was like, there was no sat-navs, there's no mobile phones.
Do you know, when you started this story and you were talking about the sort of life opportunities for people leaving school in this area, and then you compare... I mean, we live in a different world now where everyone's, you know, it's not such a big thing to, like, say, fly off for a weekend somewhere. But back then,
That's
when
huge.
everywhere around here was working in a factory, having the opportunity to travel the world, driving around, you know, all around Europe, going to all these exotic places must have been amazing.
Well, it was as I say, for a kid out of Redcar thinking I could have ended up in ICI British Steel, and I'm just thinking, here we go. You know what I mean? It's like, and I was doing something. Well, I was doing something I loved as well, and it was like, and they paid me. It wasn't a lot, by the way, Chaz. So, but it was like that opportunity fell it, and you're thinking, if you don't grab it, what's life all about? You know what I mean? Because it was 1 year out of my life, wasn't it? Which I thought.
I bet you got some dodgy looks. I bet you got some dodgy looks in the local, all teeth, tits, and tan. You know what I mean? Just sitting there.
Hey, where Tash then as well.
Where's the young'un been?
But you imagine, so it's like, so we had when he said to go to Jarama, it was like, hang on a minute, so. Where do I actually, you know, Silverstone Circuit, do I go left or right? You know what I mean? And so I guess we had a map in a book, you know what I mean? And off I trotted. And we got across the water and I headed south, and I think it was about 3 or 4 days later I ended up in Jarama in Madrid.
Thank God I've made it.
This bloody circuit, you know what I mean?
What was it like working for Neil Mackenzie?
Well, Neil was a class act. He was another one that sort of, he deserved to be where he was back then, and it was a brilliant year to work with him. It was because we were so busy. I mean, there was only two of us. Bizarrely, Simon Bleasdale is the other guy that I work with, and Simon I'm working again with this year. He's in the team, and to have that opportunity, Chrissy, in, like, you know, not just do one series but do 2 or 3 series and mix it all up. Because when we were coming back to the UK, we were using the GP bike, but we had a 250 and 350 Armstrong. Well, Donny McLeod, another rider, have you ever heard of Donny McLeod? No, you do, I just won't remember him. But he was a Scottish rider. But so they were both Scottish lads in the team. And so there was a really good rivalry between them two, you know. And Neil was coming up, and Donny was meant to be the guy that knew it all. And so Neil was pegging away at it. And we actually won the 250 and 350 British Championship that year with Neil and beat Donny, and there was a good group of class riders back in the UK then, and to win them 2 championships in my first year of working within a racing team was brilliant, and I'll never forget it, because it was so hard work. I mean, you talk about work now, but back then it was, because you did everything.
What sort of results were you getting on the world scene?
The bike wasn't really that competitive. That was our problem. There was, although the bike, I'll tell you what, if you ever saw the bike, to this day you'd think that's a lovely little motorbike. It was way ahead of its time. There was a guy called Mike Etoff who designed the bike. Now, the Armstrong bike was, they had a factory at Bolton where they made army bikes basically, but it was an old cotton mill, but downstairs there was a race department, and there was a couple of guys who were working on different projects like prototype stuff, and this guy called Mike Etoff designed this bike. It was carbon framed, carbon swinging arm, it had a Rotax tandem twin engine in it. It had a really strange sort of system where the shock laid underneath the engine, and instead of being mounted at both ends, the actual damper rod was pulled back through its body of the shock. And it had quite a weird system how it worked, but it was so advanced, this motorbike. It was very small frontal area. It was really nice motorbike. I think Neil's even got one to this day. If you ever asked him to look at it, you'd think that is just a nice little motorbike, that. The trouble was, it had this Rotax engine in it. Now, that was the
The downfall.
Achilles heel of it. It just was so unreliable. I mean, back in them days, we were building engines just constantly, and it was like we even had them to a point where you could build a brand new engine, warm it up, and the bloody end of the crankshaft would drop off it. So it was just like it was a fight, and it was always a battle to keep the thing going. So, that's what you had to do. But in the British Championship, it could dominate. You know what I mean? And Neil was in that type of rider where once he got something between his teeth, he was off.
And so obviously starting your GP career as Neil Mackenzie's mechanic in the 250s and whatever. What was your next step?
So the next step was again a bit of a strange one, because Neil had got then picked up in GP world. Is that he got an offer off Suzuki as a Grand Prix rider on a 500. A factory 500, and Irv Kenemoto was sniffing around him as well for Honda, and Irv Kenemoto sort of ran the satellite system off HRC. And in any case, Neil had said to me, "Look, I'm going, Geoff. I'm not staying with this bike anymore. I'm moving off Armstrong, and I'm thinking about going. These are the two options I've got." In any case, you'd be mad to turn the factory Suzuki ride away. So he said, "I'm going to go and ride it and see what it's like." So we turned up at Donington, and Suzuki, as it was then, it was Heron Suzuki. They brought this factory bike over, and there was a Japanese engineer with this bike, and we stood there and looked at it, and you just thought, that doesn't look like a good motorbike. It just didn't look right. And Neil rode it, and he came in, he says, "It's not what I expect that." And to have that opportunity and think, it's not what this is all about, you know what I mean?
I bet he was proper deflated after that.
I think he was, because
it would be
like
a
say,
huge opportunity,
and this was meant to be the factory project, you know what I mean? But it wasn't right, and Neil then jumped to Honda. Well, that year Neil took off with Honda and did it that way. But what came of that is that Suzuki contacted me at the end of the year and said, "Look, will you come and work with us on this project?" And
this is on the 500.
This is on the 500. So it was the first year that the factory had come back into GPs with a 500. It was a V4 engine in it. So, in any case, I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." You know what I mean? And again, it was then this stepping stone from Armstrong doing the GPs and 250 and 350 British Championship, just to be a factory effort, doing all the GPs, and that's all we were contracted to do. And it was a full-on Japanese contract deal, and so I said, "Love to. Why not? Here we go again." You know what I mean? But this time, instead of living in a caravan, we'd upgraded. So we were flying in aeroplanes.
That's it. The silver spoon.
And living in hotels. But that was the difference. You know what I mean? The factory had the funding and everything to do it. Sure. And that year was the first year that Kevin Swance was then contracted into the team as well.
Was this the Lucky Stripe?
No, this was the very first year they ran it was actually in factory colours, so it was just blue and white. Right. So the Japanese factory had put the whole project together. They wanted Swance over from America. Swance was still contracted to Yoshimura Suzuki in America doing AMA stuff, so he had to try and figure out how he was doing that and the GPs. So he said to him, "Look, I can't do every one, but I'll come in between it all." So he really did just do probably half a dozen that year rounds. But what happened is the project then moved on very quickly, because there was an English guy called Kenny Irons who rode the bike as well that year. Now, Kenny didn't, in England he had the experience, but in the World Series he didn't, and he struggled a bit to understand it, where Kev would just appear, ride the thing, be fast on it, and then Kenny tried to emulate what this American kept doing. So, in any case, at the end of that year, the project was starting to snowball, and Kev would have to come over full time. So the team changed again. So it evolved into the Pepsi Suzuki team, which I'm going back a bit again, but again,
very very famous scheme. Very.
So we got sponsored by Pepsi, massive thing, and it was like, and it took off, and then Kev had come over from America.
On first name terms now, is it? Kev.
That's it.
Well, it
Kev.
was.
What? Our kid Kev over there. There you go.
Poor Kev.
What?
I'll tell you what. Well, Kev did become a good friend, and it was always one of those where, when Kev first came over as well, he said to us, he says, "Oh,
can we be friends?"
He had to do Daytona. That was part of his last of his AMA deals to do Daytona. So Kev had said to us, "Hey, do you fancy coming over and helping out, whatever?" So we shot over to me and the guy shot over to Daytona, and he won that Daytona 200. So to be involved in that era of what he was doing, and he was this little star coming across, wasn't it? But the thing was that Kevin had to then learn Europe and how to travel around Europe and all that.
For like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people your sort of age, Kevin Schwantz would have been the childhood hero growing up, and like an icon of the sport. So to be his mechanic and like
And to call him Kev.
Yeah, but to be his mechanic and to be going all around the world with him and spending time. I mean, it's such a unique and like sort of fortunate opportunity.
That's how Piggy feels with him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm in awe of him, you know. No, but it was funny because, like you say, even when I did GPs with Neil, is that back in them days, everyone lived in the paddock. They didn't go to hotels as such, you know what I mean? So it was like you would see, like I remember one night we were in the paddock and we were having a few beers and there was a barbecue going on, and there was like, say, Wayne Gardner, Eddie Lawson, these type of riders who I was like, shit, these are the big hitters in this paddock. But they were there just chatting to you. They were just not like these normal guys that are around you, you know what I mean? And back in them days, say there was no mobile phones or anything, and I was writing letters back home saying, "You won't believe who I was having a beer with you tonight." And he was like, and I
haven't seen this since I
Are you
was
impressed?
16.
Because I am, you know. But that was the way it was.
Do you know when you were coming back and going to the local? I bet the locals just thought you were
but
Barry bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. Or here he comes again with his bloody stories.
But I bet not many people knew at that time who you were, like what you were actually achieving.
No,
you know what I mean? You were walking in going, this is a bit wasted air on you lads, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But to us, it's like,
no,
jaw dropping, isn't it?
It was to me. It's really the world I was living, and then coming back home and spending that bit of time at home. And I was thinking, it was so surreal, different, and so completely different. It was just weird. You know what I mean? That I just kept disappearing for a period of time.
I was about to say, I bet coming home to see the family, great, but I bet they'll be like, right, yeah, that's great to see you, Dad. Right, I'm off to Rotorua. I bet you couldn't wait to get
Life
back out
would be
there.
so different at home and away.
It was like you say, and I'd go and have a few pints with mates on a weekend and go out and like, you know, they'd say, "Oh, where are you going next week?" "Oh, I'm off to this country," and like you say, them guys were working in the factories around here. You know what I mean? And like you say, from one holiday a year where they'd go to, say, Spain or wherever it was, I was bouncing around Europe and around the world. You know what I mean? And
wow,
like you say, that what was quite strange is that
I bet you were that one friend where no matter where you say you've been, I've been there as well.
Yeah.
That's nothing. I've been there. I've been there 10 times.
There's now worse. Now worse. You're the kind of guy who catches an elephant in a butterfly net, aren't you? You know what I mean?
Someone's chuffed a bit because they've saved up the whole thing and got a week in, Cyprus and
or Butlins.
tells you. Well, it's not as good as Uruguay.
But what was weird is that when that say Kev came over that full year, is that we were sent to Japan, and we back in them days we built the GP bikes in Japan. So we were going for like before the first race, we'd live in Japan for 6 weeks. So you get on this airplane, turn up at the factory. You worked within the factory system, which was quite weird because you see things on TV, don't you, where the Japanese factory, they're all doing exercises out in the morning before they go in.
At Honda, they have a thing where they meditate at a certain time.
But it's true. And then there was us Europeans rocking up. Well, in Hamamatsu at that time, where the factory is there wasn't what they call round eyes there. It was just Japanese. So when we turned up as this sort of group of lads from England as the racing team, we lived in this quite nice hotel. So the Japanese said, "That's a bit more Europeanised," you know what I mean? So, and then we go into the factory on the morning, and they'd pick us up by a minibus, take us to the factory, And you'd see all these guys doing exercise, and you're thinking, should we join in or not join in? Nah, we won't join in. And then we were going into the... yeah, exactly. Fucking going in. But it was like, you go into this development workshop area and build these race bikes. But there was all sorts going around you, you know what I mean? There was like development motocross bikes. There was even electric cars back in them days that were getting designed and stuff like that. And it was so weird because you'd see these things, and there was it. I'll tell you one of the funny things. There was an area that were making wheelchairs, and they had these like machines that were testing wheelchairs with dummies in them, and they'd leave them running 24 hours until something broke on the wheelchair. Well, they had all these wheelchairs in the workshop, you know what I mean, they were messing around with. Well, when all the Japanese cleared off on a night, we'd have wheelchair races around the workshop and just messing about. But it was just like, we had this strange time in Japan where you couldn't actually go anywhere on the night because no one spoke English. There was nowhere to really go. So we ended up just living in the hotel base of it. And then we stayed out there, built the bikes. We would go to the Suzuki's test track, which was a place called Ruio, and the GP riders were brought over, and they would have the test riders there, and they would test the bikes and try and get them ready for the first race. Well, the very first time that Kevin had done that full year, we were in Japan, built these bikes. They'd redesigned this airbox system on the bike, and the bloody thing wouldn't run. And we were at the test track, and it was like all the Japanese engineers were scratching their head, why won't this thing bloody run? And they were coming up with different ideas. And I guess what they realised, that the airbox was over pressurised in the thing, so they released the air pressure and off it trotted. So I guess this was a week before the very first Grand Prix of that year at Suzuka. And I guess we rocks up at Suzuka, and Kev not only was good on it, he went and bloody won the first GP on that bike, and we were all like, shit, it's not a bad bike, that. Do you know what I mean? And yet a week before we couldn't get the thing running.
Oh, no, because you're pissing around on wheelchairs, that's why. You know what I mean? That's
But what was funny was, as soon as after the race, the Japanese just went, well, there you go, take it to Europe then. It's one here, so it'll win everywhere, won't it? Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
and they only sent one Japanese engineer with us to go to Europe, and it was like, shit, we're going to go the rest of the series. But it was just a different life back then. Do you know what I mean? How we went racing.
How did Schwanz get on that year?
To be honest, I can't remember where he finished in the championship, but he was, Kev at that point was riding through the seat of his pants. You know what I mean? The bike wasn't good enough to do what it was doing, but Kev would make that
the difference.
Mm-hmm. And it was always shit a bus, wasn't it? It was always he'd win it or he'd crash. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning of Kev's career with Suzuki, that's generally how it went on. Do you know what I mean? He was injuring himself, then he'd come back from injury, and he would do things like cutting pots off his arm, and his wrists were broken, but he'd still ride the bloody thing. You know what I mean? And do brilliantly on it. It was like everyone was astounded what he would do on that motorbike, because he just rode to that level.
Mega.
And it was always the problem with the second rider is that they, you know, and we had Rob McElney, Ron Haslam back in them days, and we got a rider called Kevin McGee, an Australian rider, come over to team up with Kev. Now Kevin McGee was about the first rider I thought I'd have a shot at Kev's level. Do you know what I mean? And we'd been testing, and back in them days we used to go to Malaysia and that and test out there in the winter time, and we tested out there, and Kev was good. He'd come from Yamaha, he was in the Kenny Roberts team, and he'd come from Yamaha onto our bike, and he was good. And it was like, hang on, we've got two good level riders now, because that was always your hope, that you would get two of them up there, and then that's how you could develop the bike faster. And Kev was coming along really good, and we went to I took a bit of a sad story, I suppose, this in one way, is that we went to Laguna Seca, and I was crew chief by then for Kev, and his bike wouldn't start, and I don't know where you've been to Laguna Seca, but the start and finish line is slightly uphill.
Yeah.
Well, back in them days, the riders had to push start the bikes. They weren't allowed running engines on the grid, so to go on the warm-up lap, they had to push him off. So we'd cleared the grid, we'd all walked away, and I turned round and saw that he was the only one left on the grid and he couldn't start it. So I jumped back over the barrier, ran up to the track, shouted him to get on it, and I'd push him. So I got him going, and off he trotted. So he got past the safety, like the pace car, and came back round the grid. But by the time he came round after, and this is how I found out about it, it was the fact that he was still out of breath because he'd been pushing the bike. The race started about 2 or 3 laps into it. It flicked him off it, and it was a big one. And in racing, when he took a slap, that one, and in any case, his wife and his brother was there, and they'd come to me and said, "Don't worry, Geoff, he was conscious, you know what I mean? The hospital guys have told us, but they're going to airlift him to the hospital." So I thought, well, he's conscious, and back in them days, you generally saw, like you say, with Kevin, he'd flick himself off the damn thing and he'd just bounce back, and your riders would, they just walk back through the door and off the trot again. And so I said, right, we'll pack everything away at the end of the meeting. I jumped in a car, drove to the hospital, and I thought, I'll just go and see him, you know what I mean, make sure he's all right, and then we'll carry on. I guess I walked in, and his wife came up to me and she said, "He's not in a good way." And I said, "Oh, I'd get away. He said he was conscious. No, he's not in a good way." So anyway, she said, "Come in with me." So I walked in, and he was laid on and he had a ventilator system on him, and they'd cut a big hole in the side of his head, and he manged himself up bad, like really bad. And even today, I cried because I thought,
I don't blame you. Mate.
Shit, we were having fun out there, and that's the consequence of it. You know what I mean? And
big shock. Yeah.
It was the first time that I suppose in all my involvement in racing that I witnessed this
reality of it.
Yeah, that's what can happen. And in any case, Kev ended up probably 3 months in hospital over there, but he recovered.
Yes.
And that's the knock-on effect of it. And the bit of a funny twist of it, and there was a funny twist.
Was this Schwanz, by the way? Or?
No, this is Kevin McGee.
Yeah,
this is the other rider. And the twist of it was that Kev actually raced again, and he did the Japanese Championship for Yamaha, won the Japanese Championship, and I finally met Kevin probably 8 years or something later, and he was we were at Phillip Island doing a GP, and Kev turned up there, and the first thing he said to me, he said, "It's your fault, you bastard, I got this hole in my head." And he was like, "Oh, he's all right then, isn't he?" Because it was like, he remembers, you know what I mean? Yeah. And he blamed me, and he blames me to this day. You know what I mean? But it was like, but as a funny way.
Oh,
as a crack, because
he,
because he was all right, but it was it ended his GP career, but it didn't end his racing career. Do you know what I mean?
Which is brilliant.
And to see him, and we had a laugh and a joke about it. Do you know what I mean? After it, but at the time, that was, like you say, the first time I'd come across that reality of a bit of fun and not a bit of fun.
Yeah, seeing the other side of the sport.
Exactly.
Yeah. And obviously, it gets mentioned all the time about being team manager at Yamaha. Was that your next step from being a crew chief with the Suzuki? What was the step to Yamaha?
Yeah, basically, I worked for Suzuki for probably, I don't know, 6-8 years or something like that. So we ended up winning the World Championship.
Which riders in that time for him? Obviously Schwanz, but
yeah. Well, it's starting off with I'll tell you, here's another little story then. That when Kev crashed, and obviously Kev couldn't ride that year, guess who came back into my life? Neil Mackenzie. And Neil was offered the ride, and we were sponsored by Lucky Strike back then.
Another famous
iconic. Well, the fag companies had started to appear and they're properly into racing then, and Neil reappeared. So it was like, there you go. Oh, Neil, we'll go racing again. And his first race that year, I think, was Jerez, and he was as bad as a dog that he got food poisoning or something. But I guess he pegged away and he got a half decent result. And it was a bit weird back in them days how MotoGP, GPs worked, is that you had an A rider in your team and a B rider. Now, the tyres were allocated as in there was a better grade tyre. So the A rider in your team got the best grade and the B rider got the crappy one.
Putting him more at risk. He's having to ride harder to make himself better.
You could never ride harder. Literally, that tyre, we were sponsored, Michelin were the tyre company we used. And back in them days, that B grade tyre was literally a second a lap straight away. You could never.
What was the point in that then?
It was bizarre. And to this day, it was like, what the hell was that
What was
all
the
about?
point?
Because we were all going racing as a team, and yet your B rider was never going to have a shot at that. So what I used to chat with Michelin, and it came up with a system, a bit of like the next best of the best B grade riders, if they got a chance, they'd get the A grade tyre, but they wouldn't get it straight away. They'd get it after a couple of practices. So you had to set your bike up round one way and then fire this tyre in. So what I used to do, because Kev was the A rider, I used to nick with one of his crew chief at the time. I used to nick one of their tyres and give it to Neil. So Neil had the best shot at getting the A grade tyre. And back in them days, there was him and a guy called Mick Doohan, who were the B graders. And so Neil had that opportunity, and generally it was between Mick Doohan and Neil who got that tyre. But Neil actually had his best year in GPs that year. He finished fourth in the World Championship. So from Neil not having anything at the beginning and Kev's accident to Neil coming into GPs and achieving what we achieved that year was brilliant, really.
Unreal.
So
when you think of fourth place now in MotoGP, you know, it's mind blowing. Like when you think of like how illustrious and how much money goes into it, and the factory effort, and it's unbelievable.
But the thing is, doesn't matter. It never matters about the timeline. It's the top of the game. It's the top of the game. You know, like now we see in the next 5-10 years, there's going to be another level and another level. But at the moment, that particular moment, that was top of the level.
When you think of how Neil Mackenzie started as well, like riding the bike himself to the Knock Hill from Scotland. I mean, it's got 2 racetracks, and you know, it's just the most unbelievable story.
It was brilliant, and it was brilliant working with him as well because, like I say, I rode 350 LCs with the kid, you know what I mean? So to go all that way with him, it was brilliant. And it's we had good fun. He was a good rider to be involved with, and it was, but what was bizarre at the end of the year, he didn't keep his deal. So again, it was, you know, when you went back to,
talking about that, you think,
what happened? Because actually, he was the best of what the B grade riders were, and to achieve fourth,
that's incredible.
And then he didn't have a job at the end of it. And As I was working in Suzuki, when Suzuki finally won the 500 World Championship with Kevin, it was the year that Wayne Rainey had crashed and got paralysed in Misano. Now, you can always say that's why Kev won the championship, and if Wayne wasn't injured and blah blah blah, you know, you can always put that scenario. But it was such a good year where Kev had matured into this kid who wasn't crashing so much. Wayne, they had this love-hate relationship, Wayne Rainey and Kevin Swans, and like I say, if you look back on that era, it was a bit like what you were saying that's happening now. You're shit, I'm not shit, and they'd have a go at each other. And because they were both American, one, like Wayne was this guy that had to come up the hard way. Kev was supposed to be the one that would give him the silver spoon treatment, and so to have that head-to-head championship loggerhead, it was going on all year, and it was the sad fact that Wayne had crashed that year and got his injury, but Kev won it. So, and that's Kev's championship, you know what I mean? Because he bloody deserved it. He put the hard work in. He took the flack. He took the injuries. He took everything. You know what I mean? That was thrown at him. But to win that one world championship for him was the pinnacle of what was going on at that time. So after that, like I say, Wayne had been injured. That winter, I'm going to do another name drop now. Kenny Roberts rang me, and Kenny Roberts was running the factory Yamaha team. You know, Kenny had retired from riding and was running the TAT team. So Kenny rang me and said, "Look, Geoff," he says, "what we want to do is, obviously Wayne's had his injury, he's had his operation. We're going to try and rehabilitate him by setting up a team for him and trying to get his mind involved in this." He says, "So I want you to be involved with it." So I said, "Yeah, cool." And so I left Suzuki and then started working for Yamaha. So it was quite weird because when Kenny had said, "Oh, we want to run this team," there was no really idea how to do anything. It was sort of this dream of trying to help Wayne. So what happened was that Kenny Roberts Jr., so Kenny's son, was coming through the ranks, and he was doing Spanish Championship on a 250. And there was a guy called Tetsuya Harada, Japanese rider, which the factory were running. So what they said to us, look, we'll put a team up and we'll put Kenny Roberts Jr. on one bike and Tetsuya Harada on the other bike. It was run as a full factory effort. So the bikes were, when we picked them up in Japan, when we got over there, but we had nothing. We didn't have a truck. We didn't have any bike bench. You know what I mean? We turned up and we used some crates upside down to work on the bikes at the first GP because we just didn't have anything. But as soon as we got back to Europe, we started to put the infrastructure together, and it was my job at that time. I wasn't the only crew chief, and I was putting a team together. So we put this team together with the help of Kenny Roberts, and we used a lot of what Kenny was doing and everything, and we ran out of his workshops in Europe, in Holland. But this team then was created, and the team was created, say, really for Wayne to, when he was right, and I don't know where you know the accident that Wayne had, but he broke his spine from just about his chest area, and they put metal rods in his spine. So once they do that, it doesn't matter what happens, you're never going to walk again. It's that you're paralysed for the rest of your life. But that was Wayne's way of thinking, right, that was my life then, and now I'm going to move on. And if you ever read Wayne's book about how he got back into normal life, he had to divide that then and thinking, right, that was me as a racer, and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So Wayne didn't come to many races, but when he did, it was to try to get his mind round off his being paralysed and try to get some normality back into his life. Anyways, we ran the team that year, and we didn't have a brilliant year, but it was not a bad year, do you know what I mean? But it was sort of thought, right, what we're going to do the following year. And Wayne kept hankering on the fact that he wanted a 500 rider, not just the 250s. Wayne just wasn't interested in the 250s. But we had to carry it on a little bit further to get everything right. Because, as I say, Kenny Roberts had the full factory 500 project going where we ran the 250. So we did it for another year and said to Wayne, right, let's get everything sorted and then we'll ask Yamaha if we can run a 500. And I guess Wayne had gone to Japan, said to the Japanese, can I have a 500? And they went, yeah, no problem. So what we did, we ran Tetsuya Harada on a 250 and put Loris Capirossi on a 500. And Wayne said, right, I'm going to come to every round now, and this is my team. This is what I want to do. So we said, full on. So we bought trucks and everything. We had the proper kit and set up for him then. And Wayne worked very hard with Loris because Loris had come up from 250 and wasn't really progressing, and he pushed him. And that year, Loris won his first 500 race. What was bizarre, at the end of the year, Loris decided to go back to 250, and Wayne couldn't quite understand it because he thought, now you've made the stepping stone, why aren't you carrying on? And Wayne was a bit disillusioned with a rider in particular by then, you know what I mean? Because something that I've learnt over all the years of working for different riders is how the format, how they go racing, how they do everything. And Wayne was so structured in every way he did it. You can see why, when I look back, that Kevin Swans was this gung-ho kid who could ride a motorbike, but Wayne Rainey was the triple world champion. And I soon worked out why Wayne was this triple world champion, because he had this structured idea of how he was going to go racing, and if he found his weaknesses, how he was going to improve it. And that guy worked so bloody hard on every aspect. So when he ran a team, he put that emphasis on the rider about what he done. But the trouble is, Loris Capirossi wasn't Wayne Rainey, and it's hard to force feed something that the kid didn't want.
Yeah.
And so anyways, the team then decided we weren't going to run the 250 anymore. So Wayne had gone to the factory, and by this time the factory were like, I wouldn't say getting upset with Kenny, but Kenny was doing his different things, and the Japanese were sort of losing a bit of control of what Kenny was doing with the bike. So Wayne had gone in and said, look, I want to run the bikes from Japan. I don't want to start messing with them. I'm not going to make my own cylinders and exhaust. And that's what Kenny was up to. And he said, I just want to run it as a full Yamaha deal. And Wayne basically nicked the project off Kenny, because Kenny was going off on a bit of a tangent. So the factories agreed with Wayne, said, right, you're going to have the full factory effort, 2 500s, and off you trot. So Wayne came back to me and says, "Great, Geoff, I don't know what we're doing." He said, I've got this thing. We're going to run 2 500s. And I said, "Let's go for it, Wayne. Let's have a proper punt at it." But the problem was then I couldn't keep working on the bikes and try to run the team with him. So I said, "Well, I've got 2 options here, Wayne. I'll go back and work on the bikes, or I'll run the team." And Wayne said, "I don't want you to go back on the bikes, Geoff. I want you to run my team, and you be the full-on team manager of what we're doing." He says, "I know I can trust you. You can do it, and I'm the guy that owns the team, but you're going to do it for me." So that's how it happened. And really, through all the next few years, that's how it was with Wayne. Wayne got to a point, and it was about his 5th year of running the team, is that Wayne physically couldn't travel around the world anymore, and because of his injuries and everything. And back then, it was, Wayne had a choice. He'd gone to see a doctor back in the States, and this doctor said to him, "You carry on what you're doing and traveling the world, in your age, you're going to die early. You're not going to live your life. It's killing you. What you're doing to your body by going in different time zones and jumping on airplanes and doing this isn't good for your body. You're paralysed. You've got to think about what that entails." So Wayne came to me and says, "I can't do it anymore, Geoff." And he was heartbroken because we built this team up and everything. And Wayne says, "I just can't do it anymore, Geoff." And we had a meeting with the Japanese, and Yamaha came back and said, "Look, obviously, Geoff, we want to keep the team. We want to keep everything that was about you and what you're doing within the team. We know Wayne's not going to be there, but we want to take it as the full factory team and carry on." So it was really nice, I think, for Wayne to sort of, when he did finish, that the factory looked at what he'd done, how he was doing things, and wanted to carry on. And so I think it was 98 Wayne finally waved us all goodbye, and went back to the States, and the Japanese took the control of everything, you know what I mean? And that was the first time then that Marlboro came to sponsor us.
Red bikes.
And it was red bikes, yeah. And that package then existed, you know what I mean? So it was another iconic part of the Marlboro Yamaha team.
Who was your 2 500 riders that time?
That time, we signed Carlos Checa and Max Biaggi, and we ran them for 4 years. And
you've worked with some people, man.
I have.
What was Biaggi like?
Everyone asks me that. And I'll tell you what, right, is that
he won't listen to this podcast, so you might as well just tell us the truth.
No, I don't care, niggas, because me and Max had that time. When we finished, we had that blowout against each other just to air it all out. But it was like 4 years with him, felt like 40 years with him. And it was weird because no one in the GP paddock had worked with that guy
for that
long. It was only me who bloody did it, you know what I mean? But it wore me out. It really, really wore me out.
In what respects?
He was over demanding to such an extent that it would wear you down. Do you know what I mean?
Give us the most preposterous
Go
example.
on.
Well, it was like, it got to a point, right, where the 500s back in them days were, I suppose, not coming to the end, but they were coming to the end. Do you know what I mean? The 4-stroke era was looming in the distance, and it was very difficult to really improve that bike. And it was getting to a point where you thought, the little changes, the Japs had come, the Japanese had come and say, "We found, 1 more horsepower or 2 more horsepower." It's like, Christ, mate, it's all that work for 2 horsepower, you know what I mean? But it was like, it was. And then Max had come along and say, "Right, I want carbon wheels for the bike." Well, no one made carbon wheels back in them days. Yeah, but I want, I've heard that, because I've been talking to Formula One designers, and they say carbon wheels are the way to go forward. It'll make the bike turn better. So Yamaha says, "Right, how do we get carbon wheels?" So we went to Ferrari, and Marcazzini, who was an Italian wheel manufacturer, and they designed carbon wheels for the bike. It was all good and ready, but they were 20,000 quid each
Development. That's what the development costs.
You know what I mean? And it was just like, well, is it going to make this improvement? And we tested them. The rear wheel just didn't make a difference at all. The front was so minimal. But it was just the fact that he would be so demanding on certain situations. And if I look back in when Max first started, is that he had the ability to be world champion. The very first year he sat on the Yamaha, he had the ability to do it. Because I don't remember, but Kenny Roberts Jr. won this world champion back that year on the Suzuki. And if Max had come to the team, because he'd ridden Hondas and he came to the Yamaha team, if he'd come and with the extent of like, I can win this, but he didn't. He was always trying to change something on the bike. Now Carlos, on the other hand, was the other guy that was just riding it. And actually, by halfway through the year, Carlos had the better chances of being world champion that year. And Max realised about halfway through the year, shit, my teammate's kicking my backside every weekend. But he'd messed around for the first half of the year. And then when he got going for the second half of the year, Carlos dropped away because Max would mind game him all the time. And Junior had already nearly nicked the championship
while these two were battling
between themselves. You know what I mean? And you sort of thought, well, what a bizarre situation. But Max always did things in his own head, in his own way. The problem was the second year there was this little Italian lad coming through the scenes, wasn't there, called Valentino Rossi. And when Valentino jumped on the Honda and we were on the Yamaha, Max started, in my opinion, was that he'd started to lose the plot about what this was all about, because it wasn't just about racing on the track, it was off the track. It was they were Italian. It was all in the press all the time, and they would have all these rubbish and it was like, and there was stuff going on track as well. And I don't know whether you remember like at Suzuka when they hit each other, and then we went to Barcelona and there was this major thing that went on that Valentino punched Max, and I was there and I witnessed it. It was just a weird situation that they were both on the rostrum. We were down in the garage in Park Vermeer ready to go up to the rostrum, and there was a spiral staircase in the garage to go up to the rostrum area. Valentino, they were shouting at each other in the garage, and we said, shut up, just get up on the rostrum and stop it. There you go. Valentino had gone up to the stairs first. Max went up behind him. As soon as Max stuck his head up the stairways, Valentino gave him a thick ear. So it was like, and then they had to do the press conference, and Max had this red mark on his face, and the press would commentate, saying, "Oh, what's that on your face?" And he said, "Oh, mosquito bite," you know what I mean? Just to wind Valentino, but Valentino had actually punched him.
God,
so, but there's that sort of thing going on, and so it all got a bit blurred about what they were actually doing on there. But Valentino would always outdo him on the fan base side of it. He just would, you know what I mean?
He's an entertainer, hasn't he? He's always...
That was the name of what Valentino was about, wasn't it? And, Max had this very Formula One orientated, straight, clean-cut image that he believed that's what it was all about. And Valentino's was this fun-loving kid who just did anything, didn't he? And Max hated it, just absolutely hated it.
And obviously when it's like in the press and everything, when Valentino joined Yamaha, the whole structure in Yamaha changed, and it was an Italian team in, and there was quite a lot of...
It wasn't. It was actually... It was funny because what had happened is that obviously we'd gone... I'll tell you a little story about the two-strokes before we finish, because that was I'd obviously gone through my racing history with two-strokes, and when the four-stroke came out, it was like, right, okay, this is the new ball game, isn't it? This is where we're going to go, and this and what I'd said to the Japanese, I said, look, what I'd like to do is let everyone in the team have a go at the 500, because it's the end of an era.
You're talking about riding the bike?
Yeah.
All right.
The mechanics and everyone, And when I think back, I thought the Japanese would just go, you were crazy, you know what I mean? And I said, and when I asked them, and I asked the big bosses, I said, I think it's a good idea for the guys who've worked on these bikes all the time, just have a ride with one of it. And they went, what a good idea, Geoff. And so we did the GP in Catalonia. The Monday, I booked the circuit for a private test. we got the Max's 500, and all the team had a go on it.
Oh wow!
And it was just this unbelievable thing.
Did you take it?
Oh,
right?
too bloody right.
What was it like?
I'll tell you what, right? Because it was. Do you know in your mind of what you'd listened to riders over the years that it'd kill you and it'd do this and it was this unrideable thing. I'm talking about the speeds we rode it, not how they rode it. But the fact was, I swear, it was the most beautiful motorbike I'd ever ridden. Do you know? And I'm thinking I could have gone down the bloody shops on this thing. It was
brilliant
just
to hear.
Incredible. And every one of us, the engineers and everything, we all got off it and just said, well, what a lovely motorbike. You moved your ass cheek and it dropped into the corner. It had carbon brakes on it and it was just, you could do, exactly. The drivability of it was amazing.
What have you been complaining about all year?
Yeah,
we didn't have chatter.
He was one of them. He's like, well, the shit you've been giving us all these years, and that's the best bike we've ever ridden.
There's you getting the sack immediately after that going, that was your idea. Everyone's left the team now, Geoff, your sack, so there you go. No, but I tell you what a lovely idea that mine is.
It was.
It's a full
and it was
team,
something
isn't it?
exactly.
End of a proper era as well.
That's fantastic.
And for the Japanese to even agree with it, and it was
That's
like,
mint.
it was mint, wasn't it?
Is that because you're like 6'5" and like
yeah. By the way, we're going to have a go.
The intimidation factor. So then obviously Valet joined Yamaha and
well, what it was, I'd say, Chrissy, the fact was that we've gone to the 4-strokes. Carlos and Max rode the 4-strokes for us as well, so it was that crossover period. So the first 4-stroke bike that Yamaha produced was it a letdown? Maybe it
Slow.
was. It was a safe bet from Yamaha. And if you think what Honda had produced, this 5-cylinder thing, and it was like, but Yamaha had said that they try to understand what was the best way forward for them. So they'd come up with that M1, and that was the bike. And what was weird is that when they first rode it, when they were by themselves, they were sort of all right. And then as soon as we did a test where Honda were there, we thought, we're going to get our backsides kicked here. And it was a bit of a kick in the teeth for us, because we thought, well, how fast now can the development is? So Yamaha started to really push on to try and think, okay, that's the bike with the engine character and what we're going to use, but how can we bring it on faster? And within a year, the bike had changed massively and it got competitive. So the second year of the 4-strokes, Max could start winning races against Valentino. So we'd moved on, do you know what I mean? And it got to that point where you're thinking, we weren't far away sometimes, and okay, it wasn't as fast as a Honda, but some tracks you don't need speed, so you could make up for it. But the one thing that we'd worked a lot on was chassis technology. So we would, even with the 500s, we would generally test 5 to 6 different chassis specifications every single year. And that was in yaw, twist, strengths of the chassis, swinging arms, everything. And so the development that Yamaha was doing behind the scenes was massive. Where Honda just had this belief that if we make this bike with the fastest engine, we'll just beat you.
We're going to win, yeah.
And that was always their philosophy. And Yamaha never wanted to fight that, because they couldn't make an engine as good as as fast as a Honda was. So Yamaha went the other way and thought, right, we'll do the chassis side of it, and we'll make this thing the best handling motorbike that there is. And even to this day, that's what you see in MotoGP, don't you? You see exactly the same situation, that Yamaha isn't the fastest thing, but you get a circuit where the thing has to handle, and all the riders will just go, it's the best thing I've ever ridden. And so their philosophy was not a bad thing to have, but to the outside world, it was always, well, the Yamaha's slow, and that's what you just said. But anyway, so after 4 years then with Max, it was decided to stop, because he sort of run his course. People around us in the team were getting tired, because it was the Honda's better than me, and Valentino situation. So he was dropped out of the team. At the same time, Marlboro stopped then as well. So then we were involved with Fortuna, which is another cigarette company, and the money wasn't as big, but it was still a good package and sponsorship to have. Now, what happened inside Yamaha was that there was a decision to be made. You either carry on with a project with a group of engineers you had, and when you think about factory efforts, when we were working in factories, there's not this 100 people. It's quite a small package of engineers, you know what I mean? And it can vary from 10, 20 engineers, so there's not hundreds of people designing road race bikes. It's quite small. But Yamaha had to make a decision because HRC is a big entity. It's just they're a money-making project where with Yamaha and Suzuki I work for, it isn't. It's just a group of engineers that go into that department. So Yamaha then decided, well, we'd had meetings with Yamaha and said, what do you want to do? How do you want to carry on? Because if we're going to try and beat this kid, we've got to try something. And then the idea came, well, what about him, Valentino, riding the Yamaha? And Valentino was at a point with Honda that he wasn't falling out with him, but he didn't feel the love. Honda always believed that if he was going to be world champion, it was because their bike was good rather than the rider. Mm-hmm. And so the initial talk with Valentino was like, do you fancy having a go? And he thought about it and I thought, actually, I do. And because it would be good for him as a person to think, if I could jump off a Honda, get on a Yamaha,
it'll show the world.
It'll show the world that I'm just the best out there. So the problem was then Yamaha, as a group of engineers, had to think, shit, if that does happen, what are we going to do with a motorbike for him? Because we've got to up our game out of it, because there's no point in paying this kid all this money to jump on a motorbike that he can't win a championship with. So what happened was inside Yamaha is that we'd gone to the big bosses, so nothing to do with the motorcycle division. These are the higher within Yamaha.
The wallet.
Exactly. And asked them to see if they could fund this project. And they went for it. They said, go on then. If we're going to carry on racing, we don't want to just be second, we want to try and win the World Championship. So the project started to grow. And Valentino finally said, yeah, I'm up for it. And there were secret meetings going on and everything. The project then had moved to Italy, so I was working out of Italy and our workshops were over there. The idea inside Yamaha was that there was a group of engineers led by a guy called Furusawa who was used within Yamaha Motor Company for different projects. So he would go, say, to the jet ski department or snowmobile, and whatever area he would go into, he would make that product the best it was ever was, and it would then be a good seller. So Yamaha had this group of engineers that thought, well, tell you what, we'll take that group of engineers, put them in the road race department, and that'll take control of that.
Because, the elite.
Yeah, because that'll change the mindset. Instead of those engineers had been all the way through the 500 and been moved into the four-stroke era, but it was the same group, so they needed some fresh blood into that project. So they were brought in, and there was 30 of these guys brought in. Well, they had contacts, because, I don't know if you know, but Toyota's part of Yamaha Group and things like that, and they were involved with Formula One and things like that. So there was a lot of different ideas getting thrown in. So by the time that Valentino agreed to ride the Yamaha, was that the project had changed completely. So I was at a point then that they needed me full time in Italy, and so they said to me, you can't, because all I was doing, I was commuting back from Redcar to Milan, and I was flying all week. I'd be in Milan, I'd come home on the weekend, see my wife and kids, and so this was going on, and that's how I was living my life. But then it came to a point where that was the option. Do I move to Italy? Lynn Jarvis, he was living in Holland. He moved his family to Italy, and that's where the whole project was going to get based out of. I came home, and my kids were probably 8, 9, 10, that sort of area.
Do you like pasta kids?
You moved to Italy. Well, they kept coming in, and oh, Dad's coming home again. You know, they meet me at the airport. But that was the problem. I'd been in the game then, near on 20 years in GPs by then, and do I take my wife and kids to Italy where they didn't even know the culture, never learned anything, and they had the life back here in Redcar, and it was difficult, because then you're thinking, do I just say goodbye to it? But the whole racing system had changed as well in my career. Like when I said to you, you know, we from living in a caravan to me being team manager of the biggest racing team in the bloody world, and it was, you know, Marlboro Yamaha was the biggest thing that was kicking around in the GPs in them time, but off the back of that, media was starting to play massively into sport by then, and it was always to that point of where I nearly lost the idea of what racing was all about, because it was like I had to deal with media side of it, but then I
your
had to go
passion became a job, and then you started to hate your job.
Yeah, and then where's the divide line then of I still love the racing. That was what I was there for. Every Sunday, that's what I'm
trying
there
to go
for.
as fast as you
but
can.
Then I'd have to deal with, and like you say, we had a big team. There was 30 staff just for the racing side, and then I had another 50 that was all our media side of it. You know what I mean? So it was a huge team to try and control. But the fact was, when all that started to kick off, it was like, I don't want to take my wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, because it's not what it's all about. That'd be so selfish from my side to think that I'd enjoyed that privileged life in racing for that long a time. My wife and kids had put up with me doing it, and then I'd said, oh, by the way, you're moving there. And guess what had happened? They'd have moved to Italy, and guess where Geoff was? I was travelling the world and leaving him there, and that wasn't what it was all about.
Totally.
I talked to a lot of people that had been in racing for long periods of time, and they said, look, Geoff, there's one thing that will happen, and I'll guarantee this, is that when you're in racing, you have to give 110%. It was no part-time job basis. When I was team manager, it was full on for 12 months. You couldn't not work. It was, people would be asking questions, how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that? So that was my life, and I just thought, I can't spoil them. And they say, when I started to talk to people, they kept saying to me, if you stay much longer, Geoff, you'll go home one day and your kids will have kids, and you'll have missed your kids, and that's something you'll never bring back in your life. And that always was in the back of my mind. So when that all was happening, it was easy for me to just say, I'll tell you what, that's it, goodbye.
You'd had such amazing times, memories, done what you wanted to do, but then
exactly, Chrissy, and I loved it, and I really loved it. You know what I mean? And of all my adventures and all the fun crack we had and going racing at that level, and what I'd learnt, and from the start into the end bit of it, and like I say, there's not many guys who can go from a mechanic to bloody team manager, the biggest team in the
chemical
world.
steel
Exactly,
around the world.
You know, so
that's
it was
phenomenal.
like, so when I look back, I thought, I've loved it.
So I tell you what, before we move on from the whole GP, is there any like special sort of memories or any stories that you feel you've missed out?
No, I think there was one that I'll tell you about. It was the fact that when we were working with Kevin, it was that at the end of the year, his first full year in Europe, is that he had to do 3 races in Japan at the end of the year. Now, one was a track called Mount Fuji, and then there was 2 other tracks that he had to go and do. So everything from the factory side was that, promotional wise, in Japan, was Kevin Swans was coming to do these 3 races. So anyways, me and a guy called Simon had jumped on an airplane, got over to this track, and the factory guys had turned up, and they said, what we've got here for you, Geoff, is that we've got his GP bike from this year, and then we've got the prototype of next year's bike. So we want him to use this as a bit of a test bed at this track, knowing the fact that Honda were bringing their new weapon out for the following year with the GP riders as well. So in any case, we started working on these bikes. We were warming them up outside. We started this new one up for the next year. Talk about vibration, it was unbelievable. When you warmed it up, it started to vibrate across the track on the stand. It was just, and I said to the Japanese, there's something wrong with this thing. It said it's vibrating. Oh, no, Geoff, it's okay, no problem. I said, you sure? Yes, no problem, this bike. So I guess Kev had turned up, and we said, oh, there's your new one and there's your old one. And he says, well, I know what my old one feels like. He said, I'll just take that new thing out in the morning. So, hey, go out for free practice. Kev came in, and we didn't say anything about vibration. He'd just come in and say, Christ, I need new fillings or something like that. And he says, this thing is an absolute bullet compared to my old bloody thing. He says, it's a rocket ship. And we said, does it feel any different? Like, really? And he goes, it vibrates a bit more. But he says, it's mint. He said, I love it. So anyway, we went into qualifying, and Kev did an absolute corker. He slipstreamed the factory HRC guys down the main straight, past them in front of all of us lot, and all the HRC Japanese. Well, there was more swords getting thrown into the guts because they thought that their bike was this best thing and the fastest ever. Kev slipstreamed them, went past them. He qualified pole position for the race, right? We did the race, he won the race, and we had the pole position as well. And he goes, we went out of there thinking, God, we can't wait till next year because this thing's an absolute bullet. If it stays together, we're on it. You know what I mean? And yes, the following weekend we went to this other racetrack. Now it was this real Mickey Mouse. It was like a Mallory Park type place. And Kev turned up and he says, "Hang on, we've just been to this proper GP type track, and you want me to ride round here?" But Kev, this is promotional work. You know, you must ride this. And he went, "I don't want to ride round there." And I guess we said, "Look, Kev, we're here. Just go out for free practice and see what you feel of it." Then he went out, and there was, honestly, it was such a tight little track. There was a Japanese rider on a 125 trying to ride on our side of Kevin on the 500, and Kev came in. He says, "I'm not riding around there." He said, "I can't." He said, "It's just, you can't ride the bike round there." You know, he says, "So I'm going home." And he goes, "We can't go home because we've got another race next weekend." He says, "I'm telling you, Geoff, I'm going home." He says, I'm not doing anymore. I've done that race for him. That's my bit done." And he stood there and he said, "Actually, what you two are going to do?" And I said, "Well, we'll have to go at the races because we're here. We're stuck in Japan now, do you know what I mean?" And he said, "No," he says, "I'll tell you what I'll do." He says, "You know that race we've just done?" And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, for setting pole position at that race," he said, and I can't remember the lap time, but he says, it's under 2 minutes. He says, "I've actually pulled around about 30,000 quid for pole position out of that race." He says, "I've got my prize money for winning it." He says, "And my mum and dad will take care of that." But he said, "They don't know I've got this 30 grand for the pole position lap." So he said, "How about you and Sai and me, we all go to Hawaii for a few days and see if we can blow this 30 grand. He was like, "What?" "Well, we meant to go." "Yes, what a bloody good idea." So it was like, so literally,
I was
we said,
so scared you were going to say no. I was.
No, I definitely wasn't. No, and it was like, shit, how do we get the bike back to the factory and then get on this airplane? And Kev said, "Well, look, what I'll do," he says, "I'll bugger off now." He says, "I'll jump on an airplane, get to Hawaii, sort it all out." He says, "You swap your flights," and he says, in a day or whatever, "and I'll meet you over there." He said, "I'll pick you up from the airport." Sure enough, we swapped our flights, got to Hawaii. Kev was there in this bloody open limousine thing. He said, "Get in, lads." He says, "We booked the hotel." We went to the hotel. It was right on the seafront at Waikiki Beach. And we didn't have a room each. We had a bloody suite each. You know what I mean? Kev said, "Well, what else do you want?" I said, "Well, we haven't got any shorts or anything." So we naffed off to the shops, bought some gear. He said, "Right, I'll meet you by the pool." Well, we got slaughtered for 3 solid days. I mean, it was just bizarre. And Kev was head up that we had to spend this money. Do you know what I mean? He was hiring bloody yachts, and we were going out in it. We went to some
proper rock
different
star
bars, you know what I mean, with ladies in it that I don't like to say, but because I didn't really go there. But it was like we just went for it, and we blew the 30 grand in 3 days.
I bet
that is.
I bet when you got
hold on, I love it. I'm sitting next to my mate who's. Potential, winner of British champion. You don't even buy me a pint. You know what I mean? There's Kevin Schwantz taking him to like full on parties and that.
I bet when you next got back to your local and "Oh, Geoff, have you been up to much?" Nah, not much. No,
but you're not going to believe
just
it.
Just a quiet one. But no, mega. Now, after you left the Yamaha team in MotoGP, the next sort of chapter that I'm aware of is joining the what was WD-40 in sort of 2013 type.
Yeah.
Were you involved with bike racing in that gap?
I'll tell you what I did. I enjoyed myself as a bike rider. So me and my friends, we were doing track days and just having a blast. And I loved it. It was the fact that when I woke up on the morning, I didn't have a set routine. I started my business, you know what I mean, something completely different.
I don't get much different than that.
Exactly. So to go from furniture, from what I did to a furniture shop in Redcar was bizarre. But I burnt out on that side of it, and I thought, let's just try something. Just
time for family, friends.
But also, I was thinking, I don't want to work on bloody motorbikes either. Do you know what I mean? And I thought, how can you make a few quid? Do you know what I mean? Quite easily. And that's how it happened. I had the premises. Then off I trotted with that. So it was just this weird scenario, really. But like I say, there was me and a gang of lads from around here. We did track days, and we went to Europe on track days. We just had a proper blast for quite a few years. You know what I mean? Where it was just a bit of fun for me and the lads. And I loved it. And I used to prep the bikes for my mates, do their track day bikes and stuff like that. And it was just mint. And then what happened was that I'd known Brent Gladwin for a lot of years, from like back in the 80s. And Brent rang me up out of the blue, and he said to me, he said, I've got this team, Geoff, and I know you've got a team, Brent, don't worry, I know what you're up to. And he says, I'm looking for a rider. And I said, and he says, I've got this Superstock 1000 and I want to find a rider for it. So I says, well, can't you find someone out of the UK? And he says, well, I fancy something a bit different, you know what I mean, and play out the ball game a bit. So I said, well, here, give us a few days and I'll make some phone calls. So I still had all my contacts and, you know, within the world. And I phoned Wayne Rainey up, actually, and because me and Wayne are still, are really good friends to this day, and we chat a lot now because Wayne's obviously doing the AMA series and stuff like that. And me and Wayne are the same age, you see. So, and when I ever met him, something just clicked between me and him, and he's like my brother, you know what I mean? And it's just a proper good crack. So when I have a chat with Wayne, so I phoned Wayne up and I said, here, Wayne, I says, is there any American kids over there that are worth having a punt over here? And he says, there's a lot of them won't come. That's the problem, is that they don't want to leave America. So he said, give us a day or two, and he said, I'll have a check around and see who was around. He gets this kid's name appeared, Tommy Aquino. And so I phoned Brent up, I says, yeah, there's this American kid called Tommy Aquino. Wayne doesn't know a lot about him, but he's been riding the 600 for Yamaha America. He's lost his ride, but he seems to have this ability to jump on something and do all right. And so Wayne said to me, do you fancy a punt with him? And I phoned Brent, and Brent says, yeah, why not? So I said, well, there's his number, give him a ring. Next thing you know, he's this American, Tommy Aquino, appears on the scene. And
he was mega when he first came over.
Well, like you say, but what I didn't do, Chris, I didn't get involved with it. I thought, do I want to go that far? I'll find you a rider, and I'll stand back now because I don't want to get back involved with it. And in any case, I think it was about the second round. Brent rang me up and he was saying, this bloody rider that you sent over from America and blah blah blah. And I said, well, what's wrong with him? And he says, well, he's not doing this right and he's not doing that right. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come to a round. And it was at Donington. It was the first time I met Tommy. And I turned up there and I met this Tommy Aquino. And all I could see was this kid with loads of charisma. Mm-hmm. He was fast at riding a motorbike. And I just thought, he's not a bad little package there. Do you know what I mean? For this kid to leave America, live at Brent Gladwin's house, you know what I mean? So he's gone from bloody California to live with Brent in Sheffield, to give everything up, never go back. He didn't want to go back to America. He was like, if I'm come over, I'm going to race. He'd never ridden a 1000cc bike before. He'd never ridden Pirelli tyres. He'd never ridden British circuits. And I thought, he's all right, this kid. He wants something out of his life, doesn't he? He's the one that's, I suppose, a bit like what I did. If you're going to have a shot at it and someone offer you, have a go at it. Because you don't know, do you? Yeah. And he did. And I said to Brent, I quite like this kid. I said, he talks the right talk to you and everything. And Brent said, well, you bloody come then and sort him out. So I said, all right then. And we did. And that year, I don't know if you remember, Chrissy.
Cadwell Park.
It was Cadwell Park. And it for some reason, it clicked there. Well, I'd sent, because Tommy, obviously, when you send a new rider to Cadwell Park, he's got to have seen it. You can't just send him blind to a track like that. So I'd said, we booked him on a track day. I sent Danny the mechanic with him, and me and Brent said, there you go, there's the bike, go and learn the circuit. I think it's Tommy rang me after about two or three sessions, and we'd only given scrub tyres as well. You know, we hadn't given new tyres. And he was on the phone. He said, I want new tyres. I said, it wasn't about doing a lap time. I said it was about learning the bloody track. That's all we wanted to do. No, I need a new set of tyres. I said, no, you don't. Yes, Danny the mechanic came on. He says, you wouldn't believe how fast he's going, you know. He said he's like about 1.5 seconds off the lap record on the track day. And I went, what? He says, honestly, he's unbelievable. He's clicked, and he loves it. Give him a new set of tyres. Let's have another punt with him. So, and he goes, when we turned up for the race, he was up for it. He thought, I can do it. I can have a result here. Well, you know, Chris, he got pole position. Mm-hmm. He won the bloody race, and I don't care what Lee Jackson said, he wasn't going to catch him. Mm. Do you know what I mean? Because the race got stopped short by 2 laps or something. But for an American kid to leave that to come to Cadwell Park, it was funny. Tommy Aquino was, I think, the only second ever American to win a race at Cadwell, and the other one was like 20 years before type of thing. It was such a rarity, wasn't it? And to do what he did that day, I said, that kid is incredible.
What's this lad doing now?
He sadly passed away. It was back in the States. I think it was motocross injury.
Yeah, and it was
following year, wasn't it?
It was, and what was so sad is that the story of it is obviously Tommy stayed over that year. Me and Brent had a discussion by then. We said, right, I want to put him on a superbike, and Brent said, well, I don't want to run a superbike. And I said, well, if we build one, will you put him on it? And Brent says, I'll tell you what, let's go for it, and we'll build him a superbike. So then that's where this superbike project started. It was for Tommy. And like you say, because Tommy had gone back to the States, we were putting this project together, building this bike for him. And it was a big step for Brent, again, to put that effort into putting this project together. But we thought that's what the kid deserved. He'd done everything right that year on the stocker, and then we thought, right, we'll put him on the super and just see where the kid was up and running on it. And he went back to the States. He was due back the first week in February, and Brent will shout at me because I might get the dates wrong. But we got a phone call, and his dad was on the phone, and there was a small motocross track near where Tommy lived, and Tommy'd been out with his, like he did all the time. It wasn't something unusual. I wouldn't say it was an unfenced circuit or whatever, but they'd been out on the track. Another lad had made a mistake, come across out the top of a berm. Tommy was coming along a straight bit towards a jump. The kid shot across the front of him, and Tommy hit him, and it killed him outright. And that was the end.
Around that time as well, there was another American that came over called Michael Corbino, and he was racing in the Triumph Triple Challenge with me, and very similar. He was such a very similar type of person, very charismatic. I think his dad was very wealthy from films in LA or whatever, and he just lived the life of Riley. He had these like boats in California. He was just, when you look at somebody's like social media, and him and his mates used to get all the motocross bikes driven in the middle of the desert, and then he would fly in on a helicopter and just go out riding bike. He was mega, and exactly the same again. He passed away very similar sort of time, and just tragic. But with Michael Corbino, he used to come around my motorhome before the races, and do you know Richard Sanguine? He does therapy or used to do therapy for the races.
Yeah.
Absolutely smashing bloke. Lovely family, Denise, Emily, Lucy, I know you mean, and real salt of the earth people. And he used to come around and basically give you like a rub and crack your back and all that type of stuff. Get you ready for the race.
Down with an oily rag.
Yeah, that's it. And do you know what? I really miss his services because he doesn't do it anymore. But I remember around that sort of time he was getting some like logos done, and it's moto therapy. No, moto therapist. Yeah. That's what his thing is. And he had moto therapist done in kind of, do you know the Rossi thing of the doctor?
Yeah.
But just the way the logo was and like the spacing, it read as Moto the Rapist. And I just remember that it was so funny. Tom's looking.
What's he on there?
But
it's obviously tickled Chris.
But yeah, just on that.
Just thinking how he didn't read it, and then you know what I mean. That kind of looks. That's pretty much advertising I'm a rapist.
So you needed to go to Specsavers, I guess.
And then
got on that thing, he couldn't read.
That whole thing obviously got you back into the race, and from then obviously loads of riders. Now, not just in the superbikes, obviously you've run riders in all classes as from the team. I had some quite successful years with especially in the lower classes with like Taz McKenzie winning Super Sport. Mason Law was pretty good on the super stock bike.
I'll stop you short a bit because the first time that, say, when Tommy came, we had Joe Francis on a Moto 3.
Moto 3.
And Joe won the Moto Championship for the team that year as well. So that was a successful year.
Sure. Now, in the superbike class, across those years, the sort of image of the team, with the trucks and the infrastructure has been there. In terms of sort of results, it's never really,
they're not good enough.
Well, if you put it like that, but the insert. I would say certain teams you think of like overperformed for what they have. Like I would say Hawk Racing's a good example of that, where over the years, even back to the Kawasaki days, where they didn't seem to sort of have the bikes and whatever. Yeah. And over the years, obviously, at the moment you've got Storm Stacey, who's learning his craft, 17-year-old, and similar with Mason Law when he stepped up. He first year off Superstock, but going back to like say when Tommy Bridewell was with you as a team. From your opinion, what do you think it is that why that combination didn't work?
There's always one of those things in a team structure, Chrissy, and you know this because you've been involved with some teams, is that, and you've jumped around and had a look within different teams, is that it's putting that bond together, you know what I mean? So you've got to have the rider, that's obviously your main aspect of it, the bike and the team, so the mechanics and that sort of structure around it. Now, when that gels, that you get that perfect fluidity within the structure. But for me, when Tommy arrived, Tommy didn't want to be in our team.
Right.
He didn't. And he was, at that part of his career, if I look at it now as looking back, is that Tommy was stuck in a bit of a funny position because he'd rode for Halsell. Halsell was the one that really had said to Brent, about putting Tommy on the bike. And Brent went for it. So he went to the sponsors and said, we're going to put Bradwell on the bike, and everyone, everything should be good. But me personally, but also I think what was happening in the team, Tommy never came to the team. And, I remember a time that we were at Knockhill and there was just me and Tommy sat there in the garage, and Tommy was just chit-chatting away, and then he turned around and he said, what bike do you think I should have next year, Geoff? And I thought, well, you know about next year, it's Knockhill, you know what I mean? We're only just early in this year. Well, Martin doesn't know what bike we should buy for next year. So I said, so that way you're going next year then? Yeah. Well, Martin's going to, so what do you, and Tommy was dead serious, do you know what I mean? And he was like, and I was thinking, so you're in this team, but you don't want to be in the team. Because next year you're going into Martin Alsell's team.
Was it a bit of a a gap filler?
Yeah, for me it was, because like you say, and then Tommy kept saying, I want me Italian mechanics and this is what I want and that, and we couldn't afford to bring people over from Italy and things like that. Bizarrely, at the end of the year, it parted company, and like you say, the results weren't there or anything, but it was the fact that for me it was a bit of a wasted year. And one of the things that I saw after that was that then Tommy then went back to Halsell's team, and they had the wish. Tommy had his wish. These Italian mechanics Martin Halsell had paid for. He bought a Suzuki, and that was going to be the package for the year. But what happened? Barry Snetterton, Tommy got the flick, and out of the team, and that was the end of that. So I don't know what was going on in the background, but there was things going on in the background.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah, that was never going to happen within our team. Do you know what I mean? So, but one of the things that I always said to Brent is that for me, what I get out of racing now is not having that situation so much. It's trying to find these younger guys and try and help them. If I can cut some corners off in their career and sort of think,
put them on the right path.
Yeah, and just try and help them. So, like you said, when we'd had success with Joe Francis, he went his different way because his mum and dad thought he was going to go to the world scene, and it was like, yeah, okay. And I guess it was like, but then Neil again reappeared in my life, and Neil came to me and said, I've got my younger son, Taron. Will you run him, Geoff? And because me and him had all the history of all our really racing career, And I didn't know much about Taron, but I soon learned. And Taron was riding Moto 3 the previous year, and we put him on a stock 600. And then the first year, Taron was struggling a bit, really. You know what I mean? If you got in the top 12 area, that was about where he was at. But then slowly we started to progress, and Neil had said to me, you know, when he said, just take him, Geoff, you know, I don't need to get involved with it, it's what you want to do. So me and Taron started quite getting a good little bond going, and it was like, okay, let's try this, let's try that. And then the following year it was changed. Taron had got the grip of what the bike was, got the grip of the riders he was riding with, and the following year it was same Mason Law and him really that was going to win the championship. And we about halfway through we were at Cadwell Park, and it was literally between them. Taron got pole position. Mason had crashed heavily in qualifying. They rebuilt his bike. He had problems with it in the morning warm up, and I said to Taron, "We've got this. We're gonna push the button here." I said, "All you have to do, if you don't get the start, sit behind him, pressurise and fuel up, get by him. We're going to win this." Taron made the fatal mistake. First lap, end of park straight, went out, brake him, full tank of fuel. Didn't compensate for everything that was going on. The wind had got up a bit that day, so there was a bit of a tailwind, and it pushed him on the grass, and Taron crashed. Mason won the race, and then the knock-on effect was that Mason won the championship.
Yeah.
And it was to that point where it was a bit unfinished business. But do you go stay in the 600 stock class, or do you move on? There you go. Neil, there was things going on with Neil and Taylor and Taron. I guess Neil had come to us and said to me and said, "Oh, I don't know what we're going to do with Taron next year." And I said, "Well, look, me and Brent want to run him. That's 110%. But I said, what we've got an idea for is putting him on a super sport bike rather than the stocker." And again, Neil says, "I can't help you with anything," or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Because they were focusing on what Taylor was doing.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, it doesn't matter. You know, I mean, Brent's going to find the funding to do it and everything, you know. And so it was Brent who went out and found the money and to run Taron on the super sport bike. But so what we did is we knew that Taron was then capable of having a shot at this championship. Well, Westy was the main guy.
Man that beat eye.
He was riding for McCann's Yamaha, wasn't he? And he had the perfect little setup, and there was Pete Jennings and all those guys, and he had these Olean's technician and all the rest of it. And there was just this small little package with me, Taron, and a couple of the guys, you know what I mean? And we said, we can beat him. We can have this. But there was Bradley Ray in it and all them lot. And I guess Taron was on a mission that year.
I remember it well,
and he was just rode brilliantly, absolutely brilliant.
When we had Taz on the podcast not too long ago, we were actually talking about that last race of the season after he'd won the championship, and he went out and beat Bradley on the last corner of the last lap, and you know that was
that's how he'd matured, Taron. He came to a point, like you said, that last race, Westy. Well, yeah, I think he crashed, didn't he, then? And also, and Taron knew it. And so Taron was champion, but the race got stopped. Taron came in the garage. He said, "I don't want to celebrate." He says, "because it's unfinished business. I've got to go back out and I've got to do this." But he says, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to win the bloody thing." He said, "I ain't going to be champion by finishing second or third. I'm going to win it." And Bradley was the one that he had to beat. And that race was absolutely incredible. That was Taron with no pressure on him because he was champion by then, and he just went for it. And that, for me, was one of the greatest endings for a young kid to come through to what he did. Was brilliant because Taron was such a lovely, quiet little lad, but you wind him up the wrong way on a racetrack, and you don't want to be on the other side of him. I'll tell you. Quick
question: if let's, for argument's sake, say a theoretical position, Brent decided to not race anymore, and so the team were folding at the end of the year, and just total theoretical situation, you could choose any BSB team right now to take over the position you are now, team manager. Which team would it be? So same manufacturers with the same riders as they are now, who would you want to work with?
A rider, because the thing is, right, because I have no ambitions to run a team. Or
You've been there, you've done it, you've got the T-shirt,
so
you've
it
done
doesn't
the lot.
bother me that. I think for me, it's finding a particular rider, do you know what I mean, to work with rather
Have you
than
fancy
a team.
roads?
But it was always one of those things. That's why. So I'm not going to answer your question because it's
fair enough.
it's not
Yes,
it's not something like that. But like I say, what we're doing with Storm now,
Mhm.
I get so much enjoyment out of working with that type of rider, mould him, try and help him to understand, because do you know when you're racing, Chris, you get quite tunnel vision sometime, and you think this is the only way. This is the only way. Well, it isn't the only way.
Yeah.
It's this sport is like, I suppose, doing a Rubik's Cube. Some bastards can do it in 2 seconds, and then some bastards will never do it if you had it for 20 years.
Mhm.
So that's the same sort of theory that comes into racing, is that you get that combination right, and the thing will click into place, and you'll get it right. But it's getting it right because it's a game. How do you play that game?
Mhm.
And one of the beauties that you've got in BSB is that you've got lots of statics, haven't you? So your bikes are pretty much, well, barring the Ducatis, are pretty much all right, aren't they? You mean you're all on the same tyres, you're all on the same ECU systems. So it's then putting the extra bits to it. You're going to rate the same guys, the same time every bloody week, you know what I mean? So how do you move up in that scale? And that's part of playing the game. And do you know when you said to me, how do you get on with Max Biaggi? Well, I'll tell you the last thing that Max said to me is I had him down the side of a truck, and I says, you've been a little bastard for 4 years to me, you know what I mean, and caused me chaos when you didn't need to. And he looked at me in the eye and he smiled at me, he says, but it's only a game, Geoff. And that's what rings my bell all the time, because it is a game. It's how you play the game, and it is a big boys game, and you've got to do it right.
That's what this episode's
like
going to be
that.
called. It's
The
only a
game.
game.
Yeah. The game.
It's only a game. Is anybody on your radar?
I like that though. I do like that.
Obviously, you've got people that are up and coming in BSB, and you've got lads like Rory Skinner, who's doing really well in Supersport. Anyone sort of younger in the sort of next generation down? Is there anyone on your radar that you think?
Well, look at what we're doing this year. We've got Corey Tinker on his little Moto3, 14-year-old kid, isn't he? I don't know where he's going to go with it, but
Giving them opportunity.
We've given him opportunity. And, well, Brent has, you know what I mean? We've got within our system. Again, with Danny Sayers, to Brent to bring a Spanish guy over, is it a norm? No, it bloody isn't. But we'll have a go with him. Rory Skinner is a different kettle of fish, because Rory actually I helped last year, and because we had the Kawasaki 636 and I had Storm on it, and Rory was struggling like hell with what he had as well, and his poor dad Mike is a lovely guy, but he was paddling like a little duck, you know what I mean, trying to keep everything, and it was such a lovely combination to watch the dad and the son. So what I used to do, I used to help Rory and Mike set the bike up and stuff like that. So do you remember when Rory was on the front row at Donington last year? That was a bit of everything going together, because I was playing Storm's bike against his bike to try and make Storm better, and Rory was coming along really well within what was going on. So when Rory got that opportunity to go to the Yamaha team, I was over the moon for him, because I said to his dad,
making it work.
Thank God you don't have to do what you're doing anymore. You can enjoy racing as a dad and a son's combination, because for you to do everything, and he'd done it for years, Mike, to take him to Europe, to do the Red Bull rookies, to do all this. But what you see now is all that bloody hard work that them two did as a father and son team that was so unusual. I'd never seen anything like that. And, I turned up with BSB, and I've heard all the stories of some of the kids go, I'm as good as this and I can do that. No, you're bloody not. You haven't done anything in your career.
Yeah.
Unless you're the champion and you've got consecutive. That's why when I came to BSB, I looked at people like Shaky Burn, I thought, shit, that guy comes here week in, week out and kicks their backsides, you know what I mean? And he really does. He dominates it. But I'd seen it in GPs, throughout the eras, that these guys do appear where the domination side of it. But like we were talking about Marquez not being there, and all of a sudden everyone can bloody win it. It's the same as what happened with Shaky. As soon as Shaky had his injury, bless him, and he didn't deserve how he ended his career, but he's still alive and he's still enjoying life and all the rest of it. But the fact is, it opened a can of worms, didn't it? Because it also, we'll all be champions, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So these kids that are coming through, they've got to keep your feet grounded, try and understand what you want out of this sport and how you're going to try and get there. The percentage of whoever get it from BSB to world level is like nearly non-existent now, isn't it? We don't, gone are the times when the crutch laws were going through and stuff like that. But maybe, like you say, with Rory, he can go to World Supersport or you get a sniff at that if there's a possibility. And I hope Storm, if he keeps progressing and chipping away, and I'm not saying next year or the year after, it will be thing. But he's young. He's 17 years old. He's got plenty of time to progress. And if someone picks up on him and he moves on, I'd like to say, go on then, son. Have a look at it.
Play a vital part in that.
And well done to him.
Out of all of the current team managers in BSB right now, who do you have the most respect for?
I don't think it's not respect as one side of it. I think when team managers chat, whether it's in MotoGP or BSB or whatever, it's the realisation that you're all in the same boat, you know what I mean? And one thing I've learned in BSB, the money's not there, you know what I mean? Doesn't matter which way you look at it. Everyone wants to go racing, but they're doing it on shoestring budgets, you know what I mean? And I always think that that's the crying shame, because the series is so good, you know what I mean? But the knock-on effect that every year everyone's grappling for the last bit of sponsorship to do this, and like you said, over the years you see riders pay for rides and stuff like that. And I always think that if you're in this series, there should be some opportunity for you guys to make a living out of it. You're risking your bloody neck. But it's like you say, I respect all the managers in the team, every team in the paddock, from the big to the little. I have no description of saying, oh, he's much better than them. I just think if you're in this sport and you're so keen to get a team operating,
mutual respect, isn't it?
It is mutual respect, because for me it didn't matter whether I was in the Marlboro Yamaha team or the factory there. When I came to BSB, it's the same. It's just at a different level, but it's the same principle of what you're trying to do. You're still trying to put a rider on the track and win the bloody thing, you know what I mean? So it's a mutual respect, I think.
There we go.
Well, I think it's a good time to wrap up. This is the first podcast that we've done powered by a generator, because usually we get a hook up.
Hey, look, I've told you there's a wind farm off there. I told you to plug into there. You were scared to swim, and I'll give you the plug and everything.
I tell you what, I'm impressed it hasn't been pinched. So the electric's been on, which is fantastic. But honestly, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's absolutely great to meet you, and good luck for the rest of the remainder of the lockdown season and future ones. So there we go.
Thanks very much, Geoff. Take care.
Carry on. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.